Pokémon, medicine and martial arts. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction, so please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story in all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter, and if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 626 Silence. Holy crap! Are all the members of the organization so clueless these days? This is truly incompetent. The atmosphere is tense right now, and his sudden appearance aside, how could anyone share their own intelligence so loudly with others, information so damaging to their own side? Resisting the urge to strangle the team member in front of him, Takukura impatiently waved his hand, telling him to get lost. Then, Takukura looked across once more, only to see three pairs of eyes, all gazing at him and the others with amusement. In fact, when they first heard the report from the S organization member, Du and the others were equally shocked by the Snow Leopard's fame. They had never imagined that the internationally renowned Snow Leopard could be one of the 8 captains of the other evil organization. But their shock was quickly overshadowed by another piece of news. Oh well, reinforcements are almost here. Doesn't it mean that if they just hold on a little longer, they can completely wipe out this group of S organization's mid-level and high-level members? But the thought lasted only a moment, and Du quickly dismissed it from his mind. No matter how he thought about it, it wasn't practical. As the saying goes, at their level, if they didn't have absolute strength to crush the enemy, then they wouldn't be able to keep them. But while they understood this, Du and his men didn't want to let go of such a great opportunity to bully others. Hey, did you hear that? Our reinforcements will be arriving soon. It's too late for you to escape now. Surrender now. And return all the Pokémon you've taken, and perhaps we can make a new arrangement. You're dreaming. Even if you truly had the ability to keep us here, we wouldn't hesitate. But if you don't have that ability, and you still want to obediently hand over your Pokémon, why don't you just go for it? How could they let the duck fly away when it was already in their hands? Each of the captured Pokémon was a treasure. After all, the Pokémon at the exchange were far superior to those in the wild. Each one held considerable potential, otherwise, the trainers wouldn't have dared to carry them as participating Pokémon. Brother, I'm back, Kona-san Watuda. At that moment, 4 different voices echoed through the passageway, followed by 4 figures emerging from it. With a Pokémon provided by Kona and Wataru, Serena and the others, along with Nobuno Miyuki, had successfully destroyed the energy devices. Fearing that Wataru and his team might encounter difficulties due to lack of Pokémon, they hurried back. They headed straight for Kona and the others. As if sensing the tense atmosphere, and taking in the tense stance on both sides, Nobuno Miyuki and Serena instantly understood the situation. Without a second thought, they each pulled a Pokéball from their possession and handed it back to Du and Kona. Seeing this, Du's eyes lit up, his mind instantly perking up. Nice move. It seems my silly little brother isn't that foolish after all. He actually knows how to build momentum for your brother. However, compared to Du's current scheming, the 3 members of Takukura's group had scowls. It's over. We've fallen for a trick. They've actually got other Pokémon on those 4 brats, damn it. They're a cunning bunch of Alliance Masters. They've even prepared for this and other Pokémon. Unaware of the situation, after witnessing the exchange, both Takukura and Huteker instinctively assumed the Pokémon Kona and Du had lent out were their backup plan. They also knew by now that the destruction of the energy device at the exchange venue was likely the work of the 4 brats. Judging from all the previous inferences, the Pokémon they possessed, capable of easily defeating their energy harvesting device, must be formidable. Perhaps even champion-level Pokémon, like those of Kona and Du. As for why champion-level Pokémon? Why even bother? Which League Star would bring leveling Pokémon instead of their main Pokémon on a quest? It seemed Takukura and the others had a truly profound misunderstanding, their imaginations incredibly wild. But it wasn't surprising, as the timing of Yulong Zanai and Serena returning the Pokémon to Du and Kona was impeccable. Now, what do we do now? Du crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow. That's right. You're not afraid, but we can outnumber you with all our Pokémon. Once our reinforcements arrive, you'll all be dead, Kona threatened. Forcing himself to calm his turbulent heart, Takukura didn't know what to do. They really hadn't checked a calendar before heading out. This was supposed to be a well-planned mission, but now, not to mention the numerous twists and turns, it might not even end well. What do you want? Not much? Again, hand over the Pokemon you stole, and you can leave. This, it seemed like the threat had worked, or the previous scene had been too much psychological pressure. This time, none of Takira's group was the first to refuse, as they had at first. Instead, they hesitated. Takira, what should we do? If we return empty-handed, we'll all be in big trouble, especially now, the organization is at a critical juncture. The ongoing plan can't be delayed or thwarted. Otherwise, not only you, but even the 8 of us together wouldn't be able to withstand the wrath of the boss. It seemed that while their hearts were slightly moved by the situation, these slight shifts couldn't completely overcome the hurdle in their hearts. As the commander-in-chief of this operation, Takukura finally spoke again after a silence. Chapter 627 Conditions. Can you please give in a little? Your request is far too much? We dare not, and we are completely unqualified to make such a decision. It's impossible. This is completely non-negotiable. Either hand over the Pokemon you stole, or we will all die together. Du's attitude was also very firm, and he refused to give in. Takukura and the others were also angry at this time. Wasn't this obviously forcing someone to do something unreasonable? Since retirement is a dead end, and yes, it is a dead end. They simply didn't plan to hand over the Pokemon. Each of them looked at the other side fiercely, with a fierce momentum that would rather die than live in disgrace. Seeing that the situation was not good, Kona hurriedly pulled Du's clothes and told him to stop talking and stop provoking the other party. Since you won't back down, there's no point in further discussion. Go ahead and fight. We're not afraid of you. A fierce look crossed Yishi's face as he slowly drew his samurai sword from its sheath. Combined with the still dry blood on his head, he truly exuded the aura of a demon from hell. Du choked, realizing his side was pushing too far. And while he said so, he wasn't entirely sure. He simply said so to gain a slight advantage. Then tell me, what exactly do you want? At least you can't take the Pokemon. After all, Pokemon are incredibly important to both you and me, and I'm sure you all understand the logic. After another long stalemate, Du sighed helplessly. Finally, he compromised and gave in. Silence fell upon the authorities. After all, this seemingly simple issue was a difficult decision for both sides, unsure of what to do. While silence descended upon the area, the masks that had trapped them had vanished from the center of the exchange venue. However, the battle inside continued unabated, with both sides winning and losing. The stronger ones crushed the enemy, leaving only those of comparable strength to intervene in the fierce stalemate. However, as the Baidu painting progressed, the trainers who had ended their battles early began to support those who were at a disadvantage or at a stalemate. Overall, the trainers from various countries were completely unaware of the existence of an undercover agent among them. This unexpected and covert move not only caused them immense suffering, but also gradually distorted the number of players in the previously balanced situation. However, the only silver lining was that the trainers who had attended the exchange meeting were all skilled and possessed powerful Pokemon. In a normal regional league Pokemon tournament, any of them would have been able to place in the top 32 or higher. Not to mention the few exceptionally skilled trainers among them. Crucially, none of the trainers who had made it to the top 8 were traders. That was truly remarkable. Thanks to these key figures, they withstood the sudden counterattack from Organization S and gradually stabilized the situation. The Pokemon of Mingfeng, Darko, and Alan were the most impressive. Darko, in particular, swiftly rescued the enemy with his legendary Pokemon, Latias and Darkrai. Alan's Mega Evolution of Charizard was also a truly impressive feat, drawing considerable attention. Takira and the other 3 naturally observed the unfolding battle. They knew they couldn't afford to lose anything. If they continued to delay, their entire team would likely be killed. Decisive action is essential. Otherwise it will lead to chaos. Takira gritted his teeth, convinced that the authorities had made their decision. Let's both compromise. We can return the Pokemon we obtained at the Pokemon Rescue Center. However, we cannot return the Pokemon our combat team seized on the battlefield. This is our final line. Whether you agree or not depends on your honesty. Most importantly, I think this shouldn't be a burden to you. You should be able to make the decision on your own without consulting your superiors. Xiu Tucker and Yishi looked at Taku in surprise. Was this still the Taku they knew, the one who never suffered a loss? Despite his usually stoic demeanor, Taku was not only incredibly powerful in combat. He was, in fact, the chief strategist and thinker among their 8 captains. After all, of the Pokémon they had seized, at least 2/3 were counted at the Pokémon Rescue Center. As for why the number of rescued Pokémon stored at the Pokémon Center was so high, that's because the elimination rate in Pokémon battles, starting from the top 64 and continuing through the top 16, is incredibly high. On average, each eliminated player loses 3 Pokémon. While the quality of the Pokémon at the Pokémon Center's recovery center isn't as high as the ones the battle teams are currently vying for, their sheer quantity is crucial, saving significant resources later on. And while their quality might not be as high as the ones the battle teams are currently vying for, they're still significantly better than the Pokémon of ordinary trainers. Takura, what are you doing? Hugh Tucker almost wanted to dissuade him, asking him to reconsider. While the current situation was dire for them, it wasn't the worst yet. However, in the face of Hugh Tucker's pleas, Takura simply waved his hand calmly, looking confidently at Du across from him, as if he were certain to agree. While it's unclear what Takura was thinking, or why he proposed this condition, it's undeniable that Takura truly is a mastermind. He had accurately grasped Du's weakness. More importantly, it coincided with his own thoughts. Just as Takura had said, he might need to consult his superiors on other matters, but not on this one. Chapter 628 3 points. Although Du felt a strange sensation within him, his heart began to waver slightly when faced with Takura's offer. But after only a moment's hesitation, a resolute look appeared in his eyes, as if he had made up his mind. If that's the case, then let's do as you say. Hand over the Pokémon you stole from the Pokémon Center, the Pokémon you're referring to. It felt like a compromise. Although Du knew this was an unchangeable fact, he couldn't help but feel a bit emotional. He was mostly complaining about the Pokémon League. You guys are holding this large-scale international exchange conference? One thing, but the security is so weak, and the real person they sent hasn't even arrived yet. If it weren't for the 3 of them being on vacation, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, in response to Du's decision, the other 2 kings, Kona and Shiba, remained silent. But their trusting eyes alone said it all. Even without Du's words, Shiba and Kona knew the situation clearly. Why is it that Du can decide on his own, as long as the Pokémon left at the Pokémon Treatment Center, to let them go? This is quite understandable. After all, the Pokémon was taken away from the Pokémon Center during treatment. If the blame is placed on them, Miss Joy will be the first to suffer. Even if Miss Joy is the one who suffers, her family, thanks to her success, will likely not be affected. However, the Joy family's image will certainly be affected. After all, the incident happened at Miss Joy's hands. Since Pokémon trainers entrust their Pokémon to the Pokémon Center, it's a sign of their trust. If the Pokémon is taken away again in this situation, it would be a breach of trust, and the Pokémon's image would undoubtedly be affected. However, if the Pokémon can be returned to the Pokémon Center, the situation will be completely different. Furthermore, whether Du will receive gratitude from Miss Joy and her family is unclear. At least they shouldn't face retaliation from the Joy family. After all, the Joy family's influence is immense throughout Japan. Almost anywhere people and Pokémon exist, there's a Pokémon Center. And, most importantly, the Joy family's greater influence and intimidation compared to the similarly named Police Junta family stems from the fact that even before Pokémon trainers reach maturity, they receive some level of preferential treatment and care from the Pokémon Center. This single fact, it can be argued, remains unchangeable. After all, every Pokémon class is subject to injury, let alone the far greater risks of battle. And even when they're not battling, Pokémon will inevitably catch a cold. After all, Pokémon aren't all-powerful. They're flesh and blood, just like our own. From this perspective, fully grown trainers, and even wild Pokémon, will inevitably owe a debt of gratitude to the Pokémon Center, and therefore to Miss Joy. This is possible, but if it were someone who still didn't become powerful after growing up, then it wouldn't be a big deal. However, consider the countless trainers and Pokémon who have received help from Miss Joy and the Pokémon Center. If every person or Pokémon helped them even a little, the entire country would likely be shaken. Besides Miss Joy, there are 2 other reasons why they agreed to this. The first is, of course, the sheer number of Pokémon stored at the Pokémon Center's treatment center. While the Pokémon's proficiency may not match the reserve stored at a city's Pokémon Center, Their numbers are still far greater than those currently battling the battle teams at the exchange meeting. As the saying goes, choose the lesser of two evils, the greater of two benefits. For them, every Pokemon they can save is a better one. And finally, there's the issue of the trainers themselves. After all, they've essentially saved the Pokemon you've left at the Pokemon Center's treatment center. As for the remaining Pokemon still in their possession, to be frank, they had nothing to do with it. After all, the poisoning of their Pokemon couldn't be blamed on them. It was their own inability to protect their Pokemon, leading to their capture. While the official Pokemon League itself bears some responsibility, it's a minor one. The most important factor is the trainer's incompetence, leading to their defeat and the theft of their Pokemon. Combined with these three factors, Du felt utterly confident. If the League were to question them, they would have their reasons and wouldn't flinch. Therefore, their persistence from the beginning until now was driven solely by humanitarianism, loyalty to their profession, and their love for Pokemon. It was their unwillingness to watch their Pokemon being captured by the evil organization. While they didn't know why the evil organization was capturing Pokemon, they could easily guess that the captured Pokemon would likely face a difficult fate. But while they were extremely reluctant to see their Pokemon taken, Du and the others were more than aware of their situation, knowing it was impossible to force. They wouldn't force anything to change until they could truly bear the consequences. It was obvious, however, that since they were on vacation and each had only brought 3 of their main Pokemon, they knew my aunt wasn't qualified. However, if they knew the other 3 were also concerned about them, I wonder what they would think. How so straightforward. If that's the case, just return the Pokemon to them. Takukura didn't feel the slightest bit of regret, waving his hand as if he was about to give up not a large number of Pokemon, but just a dispensable item. Chapter 629 Retreat. How so straightforward. In that case, Yishi, return the Pokemon to them. After hearing the order, Yishi appeared extremely reluctant. But in the end, he didn't disobey Takukura or openly oppose him. He silently pulled a bulging sack of Pokeballs from his space supplies and threw it directly at the other side. He didn't care if the sack of Pokeballs would break if the other side didn't catch them. Before Du could say anything, Ziba had already rushed out and caught the sack of Pokeballs. As if afraid the 3 opponents were cheating, Ziba didn't immediately hand the Pokeballs to Du. Instead, he carefully opened them and examined them. He even wanted to verify their authenticity, to see if they had been tampered with. He randomly pulled 2 Pokeballs from the sack and, without caring what the 3 villains would think, tossed them into the air. Bang, bang, with 2 crisp sounds, 2 Pokemon appeared before everyone's eyes. Upon seeing them, Shiba breathed a sigh of relief. Perhaps it was just luck, but the 2 Pokemon Shiba drew this time were a Banjir and an EV. If it had been common Pokemon like Venusaur, Catman, Beedrill, or even a sack of Sardonyx, Shiba would have been incredulous, perhaps even throwing the entire sack at the 3 people standing opposite. As for why she breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing these 2 Pokemon, it was simply because both Pokemon had reached the quasi-elite level and were incredibly rare. This begs the question, some would undoubtedly be skeptical of Shiba's actions, even to the point of being so cautious that they could easily offend others. Meanwhile, Watery and Kona acted completely accustomed to it, even considering they'd experienced similar situations before. It's just like the current conditions, but the other party is completely dishonest about the Pokemon they're offering. Either it's just a Pokeball, or they've rigged it, replacing the Pokemon inside with less powerful, yet quite common Pokemon. If it were the same, it would be fine, given the popularity, but powerful Pokemon are rare. Furthermore, in this situation, it's not enough to rely on the rarity of a Pokemon to guarantee accuracy. Because of the exchange, every trainer is incredibly proud, which necessitates the presence of powerful Pokemon. Therefore, one can also determine whether these Pokemon have been swapped by judging their aura. Okay, now you're confirmed. Is the Pokemon we're giving you okay? Can we leave now? Tokukin clutched tightly at Q-Tiker and Yishi, who were on the verge of a fight in their rage, but his expression remained calm. Well, that's fine. You can leave. But what about your battle teams? Shouldn't they retreat as well? Otherwise, after you leave, they might all be wiped out here. Du glanced at the S-organization battle teams in the center of the exchange hall, still battling trainers from various countries. Don't worry about that. We'll wait until the battle teams have retreated first, and then we'll leave on our own. Actually, I hope you'll keep your promise then. Takukura stopped talking immediately, instead pulling out a communication device and starting issuing orders. While they waited for Takukura's order for the battle teams to leave, Du and his group were unusually lively, seemingly discussing something. Yulong Zinai, in particular, seemed a bit agitated. "Brother, why are you letting them leave? They've even stolen everyone else's Pokémon?" Yulong Zinai, who had joined later, clearly understood the situation and asked in disbelief. He was truly baffled. Was this still his brother, the one who hated evil? Though he might have complained about his brother, he had idolized him since childhood, treating him like a role model. Besides the power of his Pokémon, even more important was his hatred of evil. Yet, this brother, the one he considered perfect, could watch others' Pokémon being snatched away, even though he had saved them. However, this completely contradicted the image he had imagined for Nobuno. "Nobuno, I know what you're seeing is a little hard to accept. But it's the truth. If you encounter something like this in the future, don't be so stubborn. While you're helping others, you should also consider your own comfort. Otherwise, not only will you help them, but you might even risk your own life." As a brother who had grown up together, Du could immediately discern his younger brother's thoughts. With a simple sigh, he placed his hands on Yurayu Nobuno's shoulders, his eyes meeting hers, a look of seriousness that frightened Yurayu Nobuno. The three women, Xiaoxu and Xiaoxu, were also puzzled by Du's actions and the underlying reasoning behind them. However, out of trust in their own side, they kept their doubts to themselves and did not ask. Meanwhile, Du's words, which could be considered teachings, reached Yurayu Nobuno with full clarity. They seemed lost in thought over Du's previous words, and silence fell for a moment. Neither side said anything further, but simply stood in a corner of the corridor, watching the members of the S organization's combat team at the center of the exchange hall, having received the order to retreat. Regardless of their opponent's current mood or the ongoing battle with me, they all collected their Pokémon and began an orderly retreat. While their Pokémon had been subjected to biochemical research, they were still a formidable force and could not be wasted. Chapter 630 The Two Heavenly Kings Help. As the battle teams were organized to retreat in an orderly manner, the most stunned were, of course, the trainers from various countries still engaged in the battle. Before they could react, they saw that the team members, who had been so aggressive and ready to fight them, had actually already reclaimed their Pokémon. Upon seeing this, some of the more responsive trainers held back. After all, they had no idea what the other team might be up to. Of course, there were also some more astute trainers who saw the clues. Meanwhile, the less intelligent trainers, those with strong bodies but simple minds, reacted with a wave of panic when they saw their team members retreating. Some highly skilled trainers even ran at their highest speeds, chasing after them, hoping to reclaim their stolen Pokémon. After all, 90% of the trainers present had their Pokémon stolen by the battle teams. As for the powerful trainers, they were completely complacent and had no intention of pursuing the group after seeing them retreat. After all, they knew that since the other side had chosen to keep quiet, it would be best for them not to pursue. After all, not only would they have a backup plan, but even if all the members of the battle group joined together, they would be a formidable force. As the saying goes, 2 fists can't beat 4 hands. The Pokémon they had were barely enough to suppress the enemy's biotic Pokémon. Furthermore, there were a few biotic Pokémon among them that could cause a great deal of trouble. Without some powerful trainers to lead the charge, they would only suffer if they followed the weaker trainers in pursuit. They might even lose their Pokémon. Rather than defending irrelevant individuals, they would rather conserve their strength. Although things had escalated to this point, this exchange meeting was still a major international event. Even more so, it only took place every 5 years. Therefore, it's unclear whether the event will continuing the one that wasn't held. If that's the case, they'll have to conserve their strength. They're more interested in personal gain than helping others recover Pokémon. People are selfish after all. Perhaps some trainers have a strong sense of justice, but they're still too insignificant in the face of the greater good. Furthermore, while this exchange is merely a competition where trainers from around the world compete to achieve a certain ranking, placing high or low is solely a matter of personal honor, not tangible rewards. After all, while it's an international competition, it's still held in Japan. Therefore, Japan must be responsible for the entire exchange, and the prizes offered are substantial. However, a country's strength is ultimately limited, and it's impossible to fully support such a large prize pool. And I'm sure many people understand the logic behind this. Thus, a subtle trend has developed: if a trainer achieves a high ranking in this exchange, bringing glory to their country, then their country will provide a reward to those trainers. Furthermore, since those goodies could be given away as prizes, they must be truly extraordinary. Therefore, rather than helping others achieve something seemingly impossible, it's better to prioritize one's own immediate interests. As the members of the S organization battle team left the exchange venue, a few completely clueless trainers could be seen following closely behind, occasionally shouting out the names of their Pokémon. While the conditions within the exchange venue were being tacitly agreed upon, several figures outside the venue continued to confront each other in the snow. A cleared area between them had been tacitly cleared for battle. The Pokémon, radiating powerful might, engaged in a fierce clash. The battle was so intense that even the falling snow dared not approach them. Around them, a cleared area had been created long before, but at this moment, it looked rather desolate. Potholes and dents littered the landscape, and the intensity of the battle was palpable, leaving traces of claw marks left by unknown Pokémon. However, compared to the initial scene, there were clearly two more figures. And naturally, two Pokémon had also appeared on the so-called battlefield. The aura of these two Pokémon was immensely powerful, and if one carefully observed it, one could sense it was comparable to the mega-evolved Giganotosaurus and Yankai's wielded claw. Perhaps only slightly more powerful than Corona's Sonata. The two Pokémon joining the fray were clearly mega-evolved Gyarados and Houndoom. It was no surprise that the Pokémon who could join the fray at this time, and even possessed the mega-evolved capabilities, were the two other kings of the Kalos region, Pakira, the king of fire, and Shimi, the king of water. It turned out that upon receiving the order, these two kings had hurried over. As they rushed over, they witnessed Mega Gardevoir and Mega Grunt, pinned down by Mega Blastoise. Without a second thought, the two champions immediately dispatched their Pokémon and mega-evolved them. This led to the scene before them. Despite being surrounded by four Pokémon, Mega Blastoise was no match for them. Initially, it had been so easily suppressing Mega Gardevoir and Mega Grunt. Instead, it was already on the defensive. If it weren't for its immense defense and its mobile turret-like attack power, it would have been defeated long ago. But even facing the onslaught of the three champions, Snow Leopard remained impassive, his expression unfazed. It was as if the one being attacked wasn't Mega Blastoise. However, the slightly cold look in his eyes betrayed his true feelings. Chapter 631 Water Rocket Cannon. That Snow Leopard on the other side is worthy of being a Snow Leopard. He's truly capable, and his reputation as the Water Lord is well deserved. His combat power is completely on a different level than mine. His use of water Pokémon far surpasses mine. At this moment, Shimi, the Water King of the Kalos region, rivaling even Kanto's Ice King, Kona, truly watched the 1-on-4 Pokémon battle before him and shook his head in awe. His tone was filled with admiration. However, while the Snow Leopard before him was deeply impressed, Shimi, driven by the League's mandate, held back in commanding his Pokémon, giving it his all. After all, they were all the Elite Four and the champions, representatives of the highest combat power in their respective countries and regions. If they couldn't stop the other side even when facing four, then if word got out, they'd likely lose their place in the International Pokémon League. It was truly humiliating, wasn't it? After hearing Shimi's lament about the enemy, the Fire King, Pakira, looked even more grim. As a part-time reporter, she knew how terrifying public opinion could be. The moment their news got out, the reputation of the four heavenly kings of Kalos would be shattered. Stop talking nonsense. Detain them immediately and ask me to report back to the Alliance. Otherwise, we'll be in big trouble tomorrow. Yankai spoke in a sullen tone, his iron sword tightening in his grip. His gaze subconsciously turned to the man across from him. Meanwhile, Snow Leopard, arguably the center of attention, didn't show any sign of loss. But inside, he was already a little panicked. Yes, he and Blastoise were powerful, to be sure. But there was no such thing as a 1-on-4 bully like you guys. Not only that, each of them was actually on the same level as Blastoise, just a little weaker. Don't underestimate this level. When reaching the supreme power level of their Pokémon, the gap is often as a chasm, and bridging it is an immense challenge. However, this hurdle is not insurmountable. It can be completely overcome with a wave of human power. After all, even an ant can't defeat an elephant, let alone a super ant. Damn it. Why are those Takumi and his gang so slow and dawdling? If this keeps up, I can't hold on. Snow Leopard couldn't count the number of times he had cursed Takumi, Xiu Tucker, and all 18 generations of their female ancestors. No, 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 the enemy's firepower is too fierce. Requesting support, at this moment, Snow Leopard desperately wanted to shout these words. However, they were just a thought, extinguished as soon as they formed. Just a thought. If you take it seriously, it would be truly lame. But seriously, if those idiots inside don't back out, we're going to collapse and have to prepare to retreat. Snow Leopard's face darkened as he watched his Mega Blastoise, once again using his talk skill, withstand Mega Argus's fire spray. The opposing Mega Argus's fire spray was incredibly powerful, and it burned a mark directly onto Mega Blastoise's shell. It was only a shallow mark, but that single mark clearly indicated that his Mega Blastoise had been attacked and damaged. Unlike those completely inhumane individuals, he was a member of the organization. It goes without saying that Snow Leopard had come this far because he had a deep bond with his Pokémon. Especially since Blastoise was a starter Pokémon, it was his beloved, his heart's desire. However, before Snow Leopard could issue any orders, he saw a flash of white light. Had the Snow Leopard not dodged with alacrity, he would have been dead. Even so, the dodging Snow Leopard saw a wisp of hair fly up from his ear, piercing the slowly falling snow. Then, a sharp gust of wind blew past his head. Drawing on his years of combat reflexes, the Snow Leopard thrust his fist forward and engaged the opponent head-on. Bang! The fists collided, producing a small, muffled sound. Both figures flew back, each emitting a muffled groan. Compared to the other, the armored figure's sound was particularly disastrous. Had he not caught the long-lost great sword as he flew backwards, and at the moment of being sent flying, he plunged it fiercely into the snow, leaving a deep wound, the Yankai would have likely landed in a disastrous state. It turned out that Yankai saw that he had not been able to take down Mega Blastoise for a long time, and was afraid that something unexpected would happen if he delayed for too long. So he planned to capture the enemy trainer first, so that the Pokémon would surrender obediently. However, Yankai made a wrong calculation after all. He really didn't expect that not only the opponent's Pokémon was so powerful, but also his own strength was so terrifying. As the two of them fought each other, he was almost killed instantly. He really lived up to the reputation of the Water Lord, who was feared by the whole world. He was so powerful that he had no friends. Rubbing his arm, which was a little numb because of the opponent, the Snow Leopard looked coldly at Yankai, who was wearing armor and holding a large sword to wipe the ground, and could only barely support his body. He slowly made a gesture of wiping his neck, and his smile looked so cold. Very good, you have completely pissed me off. Since you want to fight so badly and feel that the battle at this moment is not enough, then I will accompany you to the end. Blastoise, use high-speed rotation first, then the Blastoise, although he had already wanted to retreat in his heart and wanted to retreat as soon as possible. But in this situation, Snow Leopard could only make a fierce look, intending to make the other party feel afraid. Even though his own strength must be strong enough, out of caution, Snow Leopard really did not plan to stay any longer. Blade. Chapter 632, Reality. Blitz, as if sensing the anger within its trainer, Mega Blastoise, still besieged by 4 Mega-evolved Pokémon, didn't hesitate. Ignoring any attacks that could still be launched, Mega Blastoise retracted its head, limbs, and tail into its thick, shield-like shell. Just as Mega Blastoise had tucked its limbs into its shell, the other 4 Pokémon launched their attacks. Shadow Balls, imbued with a dark aura. Death Rays, capable of annihilating all mortal power. Explosive Flames, scorching hot enough to burn everything. And the icy, suffocating Freeze Rays. All followed, bombarding Blastoise's shell simultaneously. 4 terrifyingly powerful forces completely enveloped Mega Blastoise's immense size. The resulting explosion seemed to rip the very air apart, and a small mushroom cloud blossomed amidst the icy world. The explosion echoed, and a billowing heat wave began to spread outward. Fortunately, Karen and the others had their own Pokémon to protect them, so the impact of the force didn't significantly affect them. In this situation, feeling the constant whistling of the wind, Yankai looked up triumphantly at the Snow Leopard standing across from him, completely without any Pokémon to protect him. He had expected the Snow Leopard to be utterly distraught under the powerful blast, without the protection of Mega Blastoise. But he never expected that the moment he looked up at the other side, he was completely stunned. He was so shocked that he couldn't even utter a word. At that moment, Facing the howling wind and waves, the snow leopard seemed to be someone else standing there, his expression remaining calm. But if anyone had looked closely, they would have clearly seen that the wind and waves generated by the explosion had erected an invisible barrier in front of the snow leopard, blocking the wind. It never blew past him. Haha, I'm really a bit self-righteous, looking at the world from a narrow perspective. Snow leopard is indeed a snow leopard, its strength has actually reached such a level. Yankai could only shake his head and sigh, his eyes filled with fear, like a snow leopard's. Perhaps the three gates around him couldn't see much, but Yankai, a martial artist himself, knew exactly what this meant. Although he had reached the level of Grandmaster, there were still gaps within Grandmaster level. Each level was like a new heaven. Putting aside the question of whether the ninth heaven was truly that great, the burden of crossing it was a new heaven. It would be difficult for anyone who wasn't a rare and exceptional genius to even cross it. However, at this moment, the snow leopard, feared by Yankai, the Steel King of the Kalos region, was completely unconcerned with the raging wind. Instead, he gazed deeply at the Mega Blastoise, now completely engulfed in the explosion. He wasn't as relaxed and indifferent as he appeared. He was deeply nervous. After all, even if Mega Blastoise fought alone, he wouldn't be afraid of any Pokémon. But the combined power of the four opposing Pokémon's abilities was too overwhelming. Even when Mega Blastoise struck, the space around him seemed to be ripping apart. The very air seemed to tremble faintly, and the snow stopped falling. However, due to the intense heat generated by the explosion, coupled with the freezing temperatures, a light drizzle might have fallen. Because of their haste, neither trainer had brought umbrellas or anything like that. They simply let their thick down jackets loose under the icy rain and snow. The rain and snow seemed to wash away the impact of the explosion. The massive mushroom cloud quickly subsided in the surroundings. As the mushroom cloud dissipated, the sound of Super Blastoise vanished from the battlefield. All that remained was the ground, rapidly freezing due to the lack of warmth. Blastoise, Snow Leopard finally lost his composure at this moment, shouting out his first emotional word since the beginning. After shouting a few more times, seeing no trace of the familiar Blastoise's cries, Snow Leopard's heart sank to the bottom of the valley. The past between him and Blastoise began to replay in his mind like fragments of memory. The past brought tears to the eyes of the water deity, considered ruthless by others but also incredibly powerful. Just as Snow Leopard felt the tears welling up in his eyes, a soft sound made him look up. Catcha, catcha, the sound of the emerald crosstalk continued, escalating in number. At that moment, the ground where Mega Blastoise had been standing began to spread outward, as if covered by a spider web. Eventually, the snow that had once covered the ground suddenly shot up into the sky like a fountain, forming a hollow cylindrical wall of snow. Furthermore, the impact of the snow wall was so overwhelming that the previously slowly falling snow and ice melted into it, disappearing completely under the impact. Mega Blastoise's powerful and slightly angry voice rang out, its roar spreading upward in circles through the hollow cylinder. Finally, as if gathering its full strength, a roaring circular wave of impact blasted straight into the sky. Blastoise, I knew you wouldn't get into trouble so easily. You've lived longer than me. Snow Leopard couldn't help but smile, his hands moving quickly to wipe away the faint marks that still lingered at the corners of his eyes. Only the reddish eye sockets told the people around him and the Pokémon what his mood was like just now. At the same time, only at that moment did the Snow Leopard feel that he was still his true self. Chapter 633, Mastery of Exciting Light. Blastoise, it's time to return the favor, Snow Leopard roared, his face unfazed by the excitement. Just as Snow Leopard finished his words, a figure flashed through the skyward snow column. Before Karuna, the other champions, and the Pokémon could recover from their shock, Mega Blastoise, spinning at high speed, had already closed in. And not only that, perhaps because of its rapid rotation, besides the tearing sound of friction in the air, there was also a faint sense of sparks. However, no one paid attention to these minor details, as what happened next was the real highlight. Whether intentional or not, the Mega Blastoise's first target wasn't anyone else's Pokémon, but Yankai's Mega Claw. While still in shock, it was, after all, the king's main Pokémon, battle-hardened and withstanding countless battles, its muscular fighting instincts honed to a formidable degree. Sensing danger instantly, Mega Claws unleashed its steel-type alloy claws without a second thought, hoping to withhold the blow with its claws. However, this action, at least to some, seemed like a complete waste of effort. After all, Mega Blastoise's menacing presence made it clear it was formidable. A single misstep could spell disaster. Had Mega Claws or Yankai reacted quickly and issued the command, Mega Claw's lightning-fast speed would have easily evaded the attack. It still seemed a bit clumsy to use Mega Blastoise's high-speed spin. However, it was too late, leaving no time to react. Mega Claws, relying solely on its instincts, reacted subconsciously at the moment of the collision between Diamond and Mega Blastoise. The Mega Claws flew like a child fighting an adult. After just a single blow, the entire body was lifted and flung away fiercely. This wasn't the end of it yet. The force was too immense, leaving no room for dissipation, and no way to resist. The Mega Claws' backward form flew right past Yankai, who was standing nearby. Before Yankai could recover from the shock of his Pokémon being sent flying and then brushing past him, the Mega Claws, slamming heavily into the snow, flashed with light, and its Mega Evolution dissipated. It revealed its original form, though without the initial vigor. The Mega Claws was now in a state of disarray, its eyes swirling with fear. If anyone thought this was the end of it, they were gravely mistaken. Since the Snow Leopard had already ordered the use of its ultimate move, it wasn't just a bluff. Mega Blastoise wouldn't give up until it had achieved its intended effect. However, with Mega Claws defeated, the other Pokémon were already on guard. To prepare for Mega Blastoise's ultimate attack, the remaining three gathered together, each on high alert. They were waiting to unleash their attacks on Mega Blastoise. Blastoise, it's time to fire. Let these people see how powerful you are. As if waiting for Snow Leopard to give the command, the words had barely left his mouth when Mega Blastoise's three cannons began to fire. Mega Blastoise then adjusted each cannon to target the three opposing Pokémon, no more, no less. There was no favoritism. If there was any favoritism, it would have to be Mega Gardevoir. After all, Mega Gardevoir was the Pokémon of Champion Karen. It was certainly being treated more harshly than the other two champions. Bang, bang, bang. With the three cannon shots, the heavy weight of the situation finally settled slightly after Karino saw what she saw next. Tisk, I thought it was so impressive. It's just a water cannon after all? And you're using a water rocket cannon? Seriously, you're already grown up, can you stop acting like a child? Pakira taunted with all the eloquence of a reporter, as if only this could ease her already tense nerves. But while Pakira seemed completely relaxed, Karino and Shimmy remained solely wary. One was the wariness of a duel between experts, the other the wariness of two water-type Pokémon Masters. Really? Do you really think Blastoise is only this weak? Snow Leopard scoffed. At the same time, the watch on his wrist, which resembled a communication area, began to chime. As if completely trusting Mega Blastoise, or perhaps already knowing the upcoming battle by heart, the Snow Leopard stopped paying attention to the ongoing battle. Instead, he began fiddling with the communicator on his wristwatch. How slow. Those guys finally finished it. If it doesn't work out any better, I'll retreat, even if I have to endure the boss's scolding. Just as the Snow Leopard was preoccupied, something ominous struck Kanto and Shimmy. Three streams of water blasted directly out of Mega Blastoise. Following closely, it unleashed another freeze beam. This time, however, the freeze beam wasn't aimed at the three opposing Pokémon, but at the water column created by the already launched water cannon. The instant the freeze beam made contact, the surrounding water column was visibly frozen. However, this wasn't the most astonishing move for Kanto and the others, it was Mega Blastoise's incredible control over the freeze beam. The launched bubbles, processed by the exciting light, had already transformed into icicles. However, the icicles heading towards the three Mega Gardevoir Pokémon had already grown incredibly sharp. From a distance, they resembled three arrows hurled at breakneck speed. Specks of cold light flickered at their tips, gleaming with deadly danger. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 634 Ending. Fickle flashes of light reflected off the water cannons condensed by the freeze beam. The dangerous, sharp aura was deadly. It was obvious that the three champion-level trainers wouldn't sit still and wait for death. Each of them worked furiously, their minds racing for a countermeasure. After all, this so-called water rocket cannon looked incredibly difficult to use. If even one person failed to pull it off, Not only would they not be able to hold the snow leopard back here, they might all be wiped out. Garvito uses Illusion Beam, then Shadow Ball and Telekinesis, Harnagro uses Flame Vortex, then Flame Blaster, Dragonstorm uses Freeze Beam, then Destruction Beam. Faced with such a powerful attack, Karenine also began unleashing her own Pokemon's ultimate moves and combos. As the saying goes, unity is strength. A single chopstick is easy to break, but 10 chopsticks are hard to break. While Mega Blastoise was more powerful than any other Pokemon present, there was always a limit to its power. Furthermore, because it was attacking 3 other Pokemon, the power of its abilities was weakened and dispersed. Therefore, Mega Gardevoir and the other Pokemon didn't struggle to fend off Mega Blastoise's attacks. However, the sheer power of both abilities was too great, and the collision resulted in an explosion. This time, due to the large number of enemies on the battlefield, the explosion completely obscured both sides' vision, and some nearby Pokemon were caught in the blast. Just then, a sudden gust of wind blew, dispersing the smoke from the explosion. Kalon and the Pokemon, along with their Pokemon, instinctively closed their eyes and shielded their faces with their hands to protect themselves from the stinging wind. The gust of cold wind arrived and vanished just as quickly. In a mere moment, the chilling wind vanished. Also vanishing were Mega Blastoise, now in the ascendancy after another display of power, and its master, Snow Leopard. Their former position was now empty, devoid of any sound, only the piled snow. Where's Snow Leopard? Did he get away? But why? It's truly bizarre. He was clearly on the verge of suppressing us, yet he gave up such a golden opportunity. Kalno and the others now had a clear view of the situation, their faces filled with varying expressions. Some were stunned, some puzzled, and some were filled with anger. I didn't expect him to get away. This is truly unexpected. I thought we could stop him with our combined strength, but we've been taught a lesson. Shimmy, a master of water Pokemon like Snow Leopard, was remarkably open-minded and relaxed, shaking his head with a wry smile. There's nothing we can do about it. If we keep fighting like this, neither of us will gain anything. And do you think Snow Leopard is truly afraid of me? He's probably just treating it as a follow-up dispatch from our alliance. After all, this is the territory of the Kalos region, not the territory of their organization. They're still somewhat wary and cautious. Karuna, worthy of being a champion, saw things much more clearly than most. She even guessed Snow Leopard's thoughts with a near-perfect accuracy. But no matter what, I just feel a little bit unwilling. Snow Leopard, he's an internationally renowned figure, a formidable figure among evil organizations. If we can just hold him back here, waiting for follow-up forces to completely suppress and imprison him, wouldn't our contribution be even greater? Pakira couldn't help but fantasize. After all, the temptation of leaving Snow Leopard behind was too great for most people to refuse. You, don't overthink it. Just go back to your part-time job as a reporter. Karuna rolled her eyes at the now daydreaming superstar host. Is your giant mantis okay, Yankai? After a brief moment of playfulness, the previously tense atmosphere had become more relaxed and cheerful. Karuna and the others finally had the chance to approach Yankai and ask him about it. A look of dejection washed over Yankai's face, and he sat there dejected. The greatsword, which he had always held tightly in his hand, had now been tossed to the ground. A knight, bound by the code of chivalry, would never abandon his weapon under any circumstances. This clearly showed the depth of Yankai's devastation. The giant mantis is fine. It's just lost its ability to fight. Just leave it to Miss Joy's care. However, despite his utterly terrible mood, he was still in a state of panic. But Yankai forced himself to answer his comrade's question. I see. Kirino and the others were momentarily at a loss for words. It wasn't that they didn't want to offer words of comfort, but the blow they'd received was truly too great. The Snow Leopard was simply too powerful for them, its shadow casting a shadow that practically covered them. Alone, almost no Pokemon could stand a chance against Mega Blastoise. Teaming up offered a chance, but even in this situation, Mega Claws was effectively incapacitated. Forget it, let's put this aside for now. Let's quickly check out the situation inside the exchange meeting. We wonder what's going on there. Kirino, as if finally remembering her business, hurriedly led the way towards the exchange meeting. It's been so long. The daily is probably already cold. We'll just have to go in and collect the bodies. Pakira's heart was filled with no good intentions, and she seemed a little exhausted. That's hard to say. I heard that the three kings of the Kanto region are also present at the exchange venue. Karonori revealed the shocking news as if to stabilize the morale of the troops. Chapter 635 ending. Oh, there are three more kings. Pakira was a bit surprised to hear that Du and the other three Kanto kings were in attendance at the exchange meeting. But then she calmed down, her lips curling up in a strange way. But so what? You know, the Kanto region doesn't even have a champion. No matter how strong they are, how strong can they be? At best, they're just about on par with us. But even with our strength, we were still beaten by the snow leopards. So what can these three do? Pakira, you sound like I look down on the Kanto kings, isn't that obvious? You know, the Kanto region isn't what it used to be. If it didn't have that little bit of foundation, it would probably be at the very bottom of the national regional rankings. In that case, let's wait and see. Karuna seemed so confident in Du and the other's success that Pakira began to doubt her own judgment. But despite saying so outwardly, she wasn't sure if she truly meant what she said. Karuna's pace quickened unconsciously, and in the end, she was practically running. Meanwhile, as Karuna and the others rushed towards the forum, the fighting had already concluded, and some staff members and enthusiastic spectators had begun to clean up the scene. However, due to the intense fighting, the entire venue, save for a few small areas that hadn't seen any fighting, was relatively untouched. Some areas were no longer recognizable from their original state. For example, in several public restrooms, staff members and spectators who tried to pay their water bills couldn't find the doors. Even when they did find the doors, they found nothing like they'd imagined, shattered walls and potholes. Occasionally, water could be heard sizzling from broken pipes, dousing surrounding objects that had been blazing with flames from the intense fighting. And by this point, the missing people had been found. Of the people Yu knew, Bi Gongming and Jingxin were the most distressed. Their clothes were tattered, and scars could still be seen on their bodies. Luckily, their Pokémon had been saved, having escaped the S organization's group. After checking on the two, Yu brought his own Pokémon and headed straight to the Pokémon Center to visit Miss Joy, not forgetting to ask for her help with his Pokémon's treatment. After all, he still had Miss Joy as his godsister. The Joy family was so large that nearly all the Miss Joys in a given area were related. Therefore, with such a serious situation, Yu couldn't just pretend nothing had happened. He had to at least visit Miss Joy and see if he could be of any assistance. However, the most important thing was that they had experienced numerous fierce battles. Even though Yu had the medical skills to treat and care for his own Pokémon, he still lacked Miss Joy's expertise. Since there weren't any Pokémon battles taking place, Du and Kona, using their Pokémon still at peak strength, began conducting rescue operations at various locations within the exchange. They also used their positions to direct and dispatch staff and officials. Of course, this involved reporting to their superiors. Everything seemed to proceed smoothly, and rescue teams from the Alliance arrived quickly. Of course, there was also the inevitable incident of Du's arbitrary decision to release the S organization group and allow those combat teams to steal other people's Pokémon. This incident sparked outrage and resentment among many trainers from various countries, and even some resistance. However, the devil is always stronger than the law, and the situation was quickly suppressed. The rules were suddenly changed, transforming all subsequent battles into actual combat. This meant that the S organization group was being used to conduct the next phase of the exchange. Furthermore, the fact that their Pokémon were being stolen was being exploited, leaving those whose Pokémon were being stolen feeling helpless. While the League's actions left many trainers dissatisfied, much of their anger was directed at the S organization. This led to a period of relentless roundups by trainers from various nations after they discovered the S organization's crimes. However, all this was no big deal for the S organization. After all, with just this single mission, they had acquired a vast array of powerful Pokémon, providing ample experimental material for their quest for universal domination. Therefore, the losses suffered were merely a minor incident. However, the S organization's disruptions also prevented the exchange from proceeding normally. After all, not only was the venue already destroyed, but even just this one event alone had left some trainers suffering heavy losses. Some were left without their most valuable Pokémon, their entire supply stolen. However, the exchange was, after all, a major international event. After much deliberation, the League's top brass decided that the exchange would not proceed. However, to compensate the Pokémon trainers of various nations for their losses, the Alliance spent heavily. Generous compensation and prizes were given to the top 8. Yu was particularly delighted, as he actually had a spot among the top 8. He had practically received hundreds of thousands of alliance coins for no apparent reason, along with various Pokemon-related items. However, Yu was disappointed that there were no Master Balls among the prizes. This wasn't to say that some of the top 8 trainers didn't have Master Balls, but rather that even the higher-ranked trainers didn't have any. Chapter 636 Camping. What a shame. Sister Kona isn't traveling with us anymore. It's a shame, indeed. But it's understandable. After all, Sister Kona is the king of the Alliance. She has a lot to deal with. It's great that she can accompany us on this trip for a few days after the exchange meeting. On an unknown mountain path, the sound of 3 girls' conversation could be heard. It was undoubtedly Serena and the other 2, along with Yu and his group. After the exchange meeting, since it wasn't planned to continue, Yu and his group had no further plans. After a day of rest, Yu said goodbye to some of his friends and set out on his journey again. After all, he had never forgotten his original goal. Only by collecting 8 gym badges would he qualify to compete in the Kalos tournament. Achieving a good result would give him the confidence to return to his hometown, and that would be the true beginning of his fantasy. Afterward, the league only conducted a brief investigation after the exchange meeting concluded, avoiding any further harassment of the trainers present. Of course, as the highest-ranking figures involved in the entire incident, the 3 Kanto kings, including Wateri, also cooperated with the investigation. This delayed the matter for a day, leading to the subsequent separation of Kona and Yu, who used their remaining vacation days to travel with him. Originally, after the exchange meeting, Yu had intended to continue his journey without further delay. However, he was ultimately forced to stay and wait for Kona to complete his tasks. This, however, also allowed Yu and his traveling companions to gather all their necessary supplies, enough to last them 2 weeks of camping. During their trip with Kona, Yu and his companions happened to pass through 2 more locations hosting Pokemon shows. After these Pokemon shows, Serena had developed enough strength to compete in the Triple Crown satellite tournaments. Furthermore, through her previous and current efforts, she had already qualified for the Triple Crown satellite tournaments. It's worth noting that Air, seemingly to give Serena sufficient training, didn't participate in any of these Pokemon shows. Instead, she spectated, studying the contestants' information with the mindset of a competitor. During this time, in addition to Serena's Pokemon shows, Yu also faced several challenges from stronger opponents to improve his own skills. While not fully deploying his main Pokemon, he had both wins and losses. As for Xiaoxu, she served as a kind of nanny for the entire traveling group. However, in preparation for the upcoming breeder exam, she was constantly researching Pokemon food and other Pokemon-related knowledge. This, in turn, made the traveling group's Pokemon incredibly happy. Besides enjoying Xiaoxu's ever-increasing care, they also had a wide variety of delicious food to eat. But that wasn't the most important thing. With Kona, their new, top-tier companion, by their side, the average level of the team's Pokemon's battle prowess had improved. Air had made the most progress, followed by Serena, and Xiaoxu slightly behind. Air even managed to capture a scented spirit, adding a new member to the traveling group and making things even more lively. After catching up on the events of the past few days, let's turn our attention back to Yu and the others. Perhaps because it was almost noon, Yu and the others decided to stop traveling and set up camp. As they busied themselves with their tasks, they chatted and laughed, their Pokemon hard at work evident in the crowd. Yu and the other Pokemon formed a beautiful spectacle. After helping out, they began to move on their own. For them, facing the enemy had become an essential daily course, but because of this, Pikachu and the others' strength had gradually improved. But I say, is this really alright? We're camping under a volcano. What if we don't do well on the test? What if there's a sudden eruption? We're all doomed. Serena took her tableware from her space backpack and placed it there, looking up at the mountain above with some concern. Yu and the others had arrived at an unknown volcano. And for some unknown reason, they had set up camp directly under it. Well, I guess we can't be that unlucky. Besides, I think this is probably just an extinct volcano, right? Air rolled her eyes at Serena, seemingly annoyed, and took out the food she was going to prepare later from her space backpack. Xiaoxu had just finished feeding her Pokemon and was returning with Pokemon food. Upon hearing the conversation between the two women, she was inexplicably stunned. Her once rosy face turned a pale white, and she stuttered. But, on my way here, I heard some passers-by say that this volcano must be active. And for some reason, it seems extremely active sometimes. It erupts from time to time, sending out wisps of black smoke. Xiaoxi's words immediately frightened Serena and Air. They stiffly put down their things and looked at Xiaoxi intently. What's wrong with you? Why do you both look so shocked? Even though ghost-type Pokemon can cause trouble even during the day, you shouldn't be like this. Even though Kona is gone, at least I, a Pokemon Master, am here to protect you. If any ghost-type Pokemon that dares to frighten you appears, I will definitely capture it. I'll make it obedient, and then you can bully it every day. Do whatever you want with it. Chapter 637 Camping. As soon as that terrifying ghost-type Pokemon shows up, I promise to capture it. I'll treat it perfectly, and then you can bully it every day. Bully it however you want. Yu suddenly appeared from nowhere. Seeing the three women's strange expressions, he assumed they were frightened by something, so he spoke to himself. He patted his chest, a look of confidence on his face. Oh, Ruru. As three high-pitched screams pierced the air, Yu's originally ambitious expression suddenly changed. His body trembled for no apparent reason, and he subconsciously covered his ears. What's wrong? What's wrong? Who dares to attack us? If you have the guts, come out and fight us for 300 rounds. Yu's roar followed closely behind, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings with vigilance. But a gentle breeze blew across the fire god, and also across the group of people at the foot of the volcano. Everyone's clothes and hair swayed in the wind. A few leaves even drifted, as if seeking a new home with the wind's force. Everything seemed so quiet and peaceful. It felt like a moment of being immersed in the tranquility of nature, forgetting all worries and completely relaxing and immersing themselves in it. Puff Yu, what are you doing? You're so startled and making a fuss, and you said you wanted to protect us. And now you're so scared. Three pleasant, crisp laughs echoed after the silence. It seemed so abrupt, but it also brought a sense of joy. Yu only then realized that he had been startled by the three women in front of him. He touched his nose a little embarrassedly. Yu also felt that he was too sensitive. Although it was not as bad as before, his vigilance seemed to have decreased. Indeed, thinking back to his days of solo training, he was constantly on guard, wary of any sudden attack. But now, as the profession of Pokemon trainer gradually took over Yu's identity as a warrior, he began to truly live the life of a trainer. No longer fearful, he faced each adventure with curiosity and courage, each difficulty and challenge. Perhaps he still had a hint of caution during his usual travels, but this long period of peace had almost worn away or forgotten it. At this moment, Yu, who had been cooperating with Serena and the other two with a look of fear on his face, suddenly felt his ears move. A subtle sound reached his ears, and he clearly detected the source of the sound. He instinctively glanced over, and as if sensing his trainer's thoughts, the Pikachu beside him also stared unkindly in his trainer's direction. Who? Come out, Yu shouted suddenly from the back of his chest. He silently grasped an alliance coin in his hand, ready to sling it away with lightning speed in the next instant, striking the voice hidden in the darkness. Yu's action actually startled Serena and the other two. However, realizing that Yu might be deliberately scaring them to redeem himself from his previous loss of composure, they all grumbled in anger. Yu, what are you doing? You're so startled and making a fuss. You forgot you were startled, Yu. I know you felt embarrassed by that, but there's no need to be so. After all, we just used that trick. Air and Serena couldn't help but put their hands on their hips, looking like they were completely useless. But it was clear that in this unknown situation, Yu had absolutely no time for the two women. So he completely focused his attention and senses, locking onto the source of the voice. Seeing that Yu didn't respond, and instead that both he and his Pokemon were warily gazing at a patch of grass, Serena and the others finally realized what was happening. Yu wasn't trying to scare them, but rather that something truly was about to happen. They all grew nervous, instinctively running to their Pokemon for protection. And seemingly influenced by their masters, each Pokemon also began to grow wary. Suddenly, the atmosphere at the previously relaxed campsite became subdued, a tinge of tension permeating the air. Oh. Are you playing hide and seek with us? You're not even going to come out yet? Yu's face was filled with a look of genuine interest, but the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl in a hint of playfulness. Since he's not planning on coming out, then Pikachu, help him. Use 100,000 votes to entertain our distinguished guest. Seeing that the person hiding deep within still refused to reveal themselves, Yu didn't hesitate. He commanded Pikachu to unleash his attack, aiming to slash the person out. Pikachu receiving the command, Pikachu didn't hesitate. Arcs of electricity began to form in the electric sacs on either side of his cheeks, and then he lashed out without mercy, without any fuss or trickery. The violent 100,000 volts of electricity instantly pierced through the layers of space and struck the spot Yu had pointed. Boom crack crack, accompanied by the 100,000 volts of electricity, a small explosion erupted in that area. Intense arcs of electricity flickered and danced across it. Seeing this, Serena and the other two couldn't help but feel a surge of nervousness, their beautiful eyes watching with a mixture of anticipation and worry. As time slowly passed, the arcs that had flickered and pulsated in the area struck by the 100,000 volt shock gradually dissipated. A gentle, slightly warm breeze blew by, swaying the grass and surrounding trees. Swish, 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 but the sound, at that moment, felt awkward. Yiyu's expression froze, and Serena and the other two looked at him with strange eyes. Chapter 638 Pokemon Photographer. Darkness, darkness, Murkrows appeared from nowhere, flying neatly in a single line over Yiyu and the others. Their cries seemed to mock Yiyu, further adding to the already awkward atmosphere. Yiyu, have you become a little overly sensitive after what happened at the exchange meeting? There's clearly no one here. You're scaring us. How disgusting, Xiaozu couldn't help but grumble. Yiyu was unable to offer any excuses. After all, even if he had found the person, he wouldn't reveal himself. But that was too late. Yiyu, who had been wearing a naive smile just a moment ago, suddenly turned cold. He raised his hand, and a beam of silver light shot out, leaving a silver-white chain of fire in the air, leaving fragments of shadows. The speed was so great that the sound of the air breaking was so deafening that it even echoed with a sonic boom. Then, before anyone and their Pokémon could react, a crisp sound echoed, followed by a scream. Ouch! It hurts, but Pikachu's reaction was incredibly quick. As the scream rang out, Pikachu's petite figure darted away, the flash of lightning involuntarily. Its swift and fluid form was like a bolt of lightning. In a split second, it was directly in front of the suddenly appearing figure, blocking all escape routes. But at that moment, the figure clearly had no time to care about the situation. After rubbing his still aching wrist, the man, regardless of the numbness in his arm, rushed forward to check his precious camera. But when he saw a hole in it, his heart sank. After confirming once again that his camera was completely broken, his face practically contorted. Wow! Baby, what's wrong with you? Don't scare me. How could you leave me all alone? As if expressing genuine emotion, a few tears trickled down his face. He was completely oblivious to the group of people and Pokémon staring at him with strange expressions. He continued to wail, almost throwing a tantrum. Yiyu, Serena, and the other two girls also noticed something was amiss. Regardless of the slight twitching of their lips at the sight, they hurried forward with their Pokémon to investigate. Hello, can I interrupt you for a moment? Who are you, and why are you so close to our camp? As a girl, Xiaozu, though still somewhat wary after witnessing such a situation, felt sympathetic and kind, so she summoned the courage to approach and ask. Fearing Xiaozu might be hurt by this strangely behaving person, Yiyu saw Xiaozu take the lead and immediately followed, instinctively pulling her behind him to protect her. Yes, who are you? What's your purpose for sneaking around our camp? Come here quickly, or I'll be rude. He showed none of the gentleness he displayed when facing Serena and the other two, and instead displayed a rather naive attitude. When facing a complete stranger, Yiyu, out of caution, usually adopted a cold, stern expression, making him seem unapproachable. If they hadn't been traveling with Yiyu for so long, forming a familiarity, Ayer and the others would probably have found it hard to believe that this was the man they usually got along so well with. Although Serena and the other two knew this, they didn't bother to point it out. The man was clearly startled by Yiyu's sudden aura. His muttered complaints vanished instantly. Yinian looked at Yiyu nervously, as if he were the true victim. Well, in a sense, he was. But he had to resign himself to the present reality. Well, don't get me wrong. I'm a good person, a very good person. I mean you no harm. My name is Amen, and I'm a Pokemon photographer, amen. Fearing misunderstanding, hurriedly defended himself, even holding up his now hole-pierced camera and shaking it to lend his words a certain credibility. Really? You don't believe me? I'm a Pokemon photographer. And quite a famous one, too. If you don't believe me, just look. He swallowed softly, noticing the Pokemon around him still glaring at him. Amen's heart trembled involuntarily. Quickly grabbing the backpack he'd discarded, Amen glanced at it briefly before quickly pulling out a magazine and handing it to Xiaoxu, the closest and more friendly-looking girl. Xiaoxu, is everything he said true? Yiyu, though still somewhat convinced, glanced at Xiaoxu. Xiaoxu scanned the magazine with remarkable speed, scanning through its contents in just 2 or 3 minutes. Serena and Air leaned forward curiously, their heads huddled together. Before Xiaoxu could speak, Serena spoke up. What you said seems to be true. He seems to be a Pokemon photographer, and his photos have even been published in this magazine. Air's eyes lit up, as if she had caught on to something, and she quickly added to Serena's unfinished words. And it seems he even won an award? See, I told you I'm a Pokemon photographer, and I really don't mean any harm to you. I was just taking photos nearby when I saw this heartwarming moment between you and your Pokemon. Out of professional instinct, I wanted to record this beautiful moment for you. Chapter 639 Concerns. Record this beautiful moment for us. And then publish it on some websites, right? But after hearing the words of the Pokemon photographer named Amen, Air looked at the man before her with a half-smile. Amen's heart skipped a beat as he thought something was wrong, and his expression changed. Hey, let me tell you. The League's laws stipulate that displaying someone's likeness without their consent is illegal. Air rested her hand on her chin, and after finishing her previous words, she fell into a state of deep thought. Amen's expression changed drastically after hearing this. He looked flustered, trying to make some kind of excuse, but he only opened his mouth, no sound coming out. Oh, so you really do have some bad intentions towards us? Yiyu's eyes lit up after hearing this. He squeezed his hands together, cracking their joints, and the smile on his lips gave Amen a chill. As if to better cooperate with their trainer, Pikachu and the others followed closely behind, their signature moves being performed with subtle, almost imperceptible preludes. No, you misunderstood. It's just instinctive seeing beauty, and as a photographer, I can't help but want to capture this beautiful moment. Can't I give you the developed photos as a souvenir? Amen chuckled, sweat dripping down his forehead. Really? Yiyu still looked a little unconvinced, his eyes narrowed as he studied him. Yes, believe me. I really mean no harm. It's just that the harmony you displayed with your Pokemon just now completely captivated me. Amen was on the verge of tears. What the hell was going on? He was just acting out of professional instinct, wanting to capture what he considered the most beautiful photo of humans and Pokemon interacting, to keep as a memory. And how had he gotten into trouble with this bunch of killers? Especially the barbarian in front of him, who, after a disagreement, was about to order his Pokemon to attack him. If it weren't for the timing, I'd definitely give them a good beating. Yiyu's expression was impassive, his gaze fixed on Amen, who was looking nervous and wiping the sweat from his forehead. His slightly narrowed eyes seemed to see through this seemingly harmless individual. Haha, look at what you're saying. Everyone, don't be so nervous. Relax a little. We're not unreasonable people. We're all civilized people. We can sit down and have a good chat, have some tea, or something. Just when everyone was about to give in to the tense and oppressive atmosphere, Yiyu's expression softened, revealing a smile as bright as the sun. Yeah, I just have some photography questions I wanted to ask you guys. Seeing this, Amen couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Why did he just agree? It was a bit flattering. Right, that's how it should be. Doesn't that mean I don't have to pay for your camera? Yiyu smiled, looking at the camera with a round hole in it that Amen was holding. Although Yiyu usually didn't care about anything, even the clothes he wore, aside from some travel supplies and essential Pokemon gear, were all picked out and bought for him by his son and 3 daughters. He knew that a camera wasn't cheap. Furthermore, the camera the man in front of him held looked like a high-end product. He couldn't let him use this as an excuse to blame him, or he'd be carrying a debt collector around every day, and where would that end? He was destined to become the world's #1 Pokemon Master. How could he allow such a demeaning scene to happen? Furthermore, although he still felt uncertain, the seemingly harmless Amen across from him, with his innocent smile, always gave him a sense of something off. This feeling made Yu feel like he was being watched by a venomous Pokemon like Arbok. He felt extremely uncomfortable and oppressed, but the most frustrating thing was that he couldn't find any loopholes or what was wrong. Given all these circumstances, and the fact that the other party had actually startled him and the others, he couldn't seem to find any flaws. Then consider it compensation for mental damages. Who told him to be an upright person? Why didn't he prefer to be a shadowy rat? No, of course not. After all, this is all my fault, right? Besides, it's just a camera, not worth much. What's most important is the film inside. As if to make his words more convincing, Amen's hands kept moving. He directly pulled out the film from the camera, which had been punctured, and waved it in front of Yu and the others. For me, or perhaps for us Pokemon photographers, what's preserved inside is the most precious, is that so? Then I'm relieved. Yu seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted, but he also seemed to be afraid that Amen would regret it. He quickly added, then it's a deal. Don't try to get on with me then. I'm telling you, no money, but my life. Puff. After hearing Yu's slightly helpless words, Xiaoxia and the other two girls finally broke into laughter. Air, however, was unaware of Yu's reasons and intentions. She genuinely assumed Yu was short of money, and, perversely, stepped forward to offer Yu the compensation. But before Air could even make a move, Yu, as if anticipating her intentions, pulled her back and shook his head slightly. You're kidding? He didn't even know the man in front of him, and he was being asked to pay him. Don't even think about it. He'd just say he didn't have any money, and even if he did, he wouldn't pay. Yu was clearly still harboring significant concerns, but he remained impassive, not letting them show. It's okay. These are just small matters. No problem. Air was about to step forward to apologize, but was stopped again by the man next to him. Amen, smiling on the surface, was actually being a bitch. Don't give me a chance, or I'll show this little brat why the flowers are so red. Chapter 640 Chat? Haha, Mr. Amen is a straightforward guy after all. Since you've stressed this so repeatedly, we can't afford to offend you. Yu didn't care what Amen thought at this moment. Even if he did, he could only fight back. Besides, if he didn't take advantage of an opportunity, he'd be a fool. Now he had the upper hand. He shouldn't be the one panicking. It's okay. Just give me this film. The scene of you and the Pokemon interacting harmoniously just now was truly amazing. I still can't forget it and am deeply moved. Amen was clearly still obsessed with the photos he had just taken, and brought it up again. Oh, I understand. It's our honor to be published as a promotional feature. By the way, it's getting dark. Why don't you stay and have dinner with us? We're just preparing the food. To Amen's great surprise, Yu was surprisingly easygoing this time, agreeing without a second thought. He even extended an invitation to dinner. Could this be some conspiracy? Why was this guy suddenly being so nice to him? Amen couldn't help but feel wary. It wasn't his fault. Yu's behavior was simply too unusual. Years of professional vigilance within Amen told him to retreat immediately. But a glance at the Pokemon surrounding him, seemingly down on their guard but still occasionally glancing in from the corner of their eyes, quickly overturned his thoughts. Sorry to bother you. I'm here collecting materials for the next few days, so I'll have to camp for a few days. Plus, my cooking skills are terrible, so I'm prepared to just live on dry food for a few days. Amen's face was filled with shame, looking deeply embarrassed. I see, it's not too much of a bother. We're just about to get ready for dinner, so please stay and wait a while. Serena was surprisingly enthusiastic, even bringing along Air, Xiaoxia, and her Pokemon to start preparing dinner. Then I'll leave it to you. I have some luggage over there, I'll go get it now. As if truly reluctant to remain under Yu's watchful eye, Amen vanished in a flash after just one word. Seeing this, Yu made no effort to stop him. Instead, after watching Amen disappear, he let Pikachu and the others disperse freely. The night sky was dotted with stars, their twinkling stars dispelling the darkness, making the distance between heaven and earth seem less measurable. The night in the countryside was always so beautiful. In the brightly lit campground, after feasting and drinking, everyone went about their business. Serena and the other two girls cleared away the dishes as usual. Yu, Pikachu, and the others resumed their nighttime training. As for Amen, who had come to eat for free, he had offered to help but was turned away. He simply found an open space and leaned against a tree, looking like a perfectly ordinary scene. His eyes flickered slightly, and it was unclear what he was thinking about. Even when Yu approached, he didn't notice. "What are you thinking about?" So absorbed, after gently patting Amen's shoulder to bring him back to his senses, Yu found a seat and sat down. Even though he was questioning, his eyes never left the Pokémon undergoing special training. Among them were not only Yu's Pokémon, but also those of his son and 3 daughters. It's worth noting that the day after the exchange meeting, for some unknown reason, Yu reclaimed all the Pokémon he had left with Professor Oak. Even though his own 6 Pokémon slots were full, he still placed the extra Pokéballs with the other 3 women, who had slots for them. After all, that way, the extra Pokéballs wouldn't have to be transferred. After the events of the exchange meeting, and the previous ones, Xiaoxia and the other 2 girls' determination to improve their Pokémon's strength became even stronger. During the following days of travel, their Pokémon were no longer free-range, having given up their own strength beyond improving their professional skills. This led to the current scene, where Pichu and the others were helping to train Vixen and Vixen. "No, I was just wondering how harmonious the Pokémon are. The relationship between you and your Pokémon feels more like friends, or family. Not like a battle between master and servant at all." Finally, as if coming back to his senses from his own world, Amen rested his hands behind his head and looked up at the starry sky. "Of course. Pikachu and the others are my best friends, my best partners." Through the scattered starlight, the pride on Yu's face was clearly visible. "Oh, I've heard you Pokémon photographers are like travelers. To capture the best footage, you've traveled thousands of miles. So, do you have any interesting stories you could share? And since you're here, doesn't that mean there's something here that interests you?" Yu, seemingly unable to contain his frustration, began to inquire about Amen's purpose for his trip. But to avoid appearing too direct, he even resorted to roundabout tactics. "That's true. I'm not exaggerating, but Pokémon photographers like us have seen more than you've ever tasted." When discussing their profession, everyone beamed with pride, and Amen was no exception. "Since you want to hear my stories as a photographer, let me tell you." Amen was incredibly excited, barely pausing once he started. He grew more and more elated as he spoke, seemingly completely oblivious to the unpleasantness of the previous incident. Yu, listening intently, could even hear the occasional laughter and chatter between the two. What they saw was so shocking that the 3 women who were still busy not far away exclaimed that they couldn't understand it. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 641 Puzzled. And then, what exactly happened? Amen. Since you're such a great Pokémon photographer, have you taken any pictures of the legendary beasts? Yes. Rumor has it that Ho-Oh is very majestic. I wonder if you've ever photographed one. Eventually, the 3 women, having finished their tasks, joined in the conversation. The atmosphere was quite pleasant, not at all tense, as it had been at the beginning. There was a slight awkwardness to the air. But Amen was stumped by the questions now. Cold sweat began to drip down his once confident and smug face. At first, Yu's questions were fine. As someone who had personally experienced this, it certainly felt quite impressive. But later, with his son and 3 daughters joining in, the conversation began to veer off course. Take, for example, these few questions. Amen was completely devastated. And what about Ho-Oh? Only I could see the Phoenix Ho-Oh. That's a sight reserved for the chosen, the destined. I had a rough idea of my own level. And I saw Ho-Oh? Why didn't you ask me if I'd ever taken a picture of Arceus? And they started with such a high-level difficulty question. These people must be doing this on purpose, wanting to make me look bad. Although he was ranting furiously in his mind, Amen couldn't bring himself to say it out loud. He didn't have the nerve to say it. That Ho-Oh is a legendary Pokémon, nomadic. I only know it's been seen in the Chengdu and Kanto regions, but those 2 regions are so vast. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. How could I possibly find it? Amen was initially indignant and tried to defend himself. But then he felt a bit embarrassed, a complete loss of face for his title as the world's #1 Pokémon photographer. He coughed lightly a few times to draw everyone's attention, then continued, But, while I haven't seen a legendary Pokemon of Ho-Oh's level, I have encountered Zapdos, he spoke, trying to make his words more convincing. Amen also pulled a photo album from his bag and began to search through photos of Zapdos. You probably don't know what kind of Pokemon Zapdos is, right? Let me tell you, it's different from the 3 sacred beasts that Phoenix rides. Zapdos is one of the 3 sacred beasts that Lugia, the god of the sea, rides. Well, Zapdos is almost on the same level as Rikau, one of the 3 sacred beasts, right? They're both legendary beasts, and they're rare to see. As if worried that you and the others didn't know what kind of Pokemon Zapdos was, Amen even explained it as he searched. Oh, I found it. This is it. Serena took the album from Amen with some curiosity. Perhaps for a trainer like you, who already had a sacred beast like Suicune, Zapdos, a sacred beast on the same level as a water beast, wouldn't be of much interest. But since it was a sacred beast, he'd probably take a closer look. But he wouldn't be as excited as Serena, a novice trainer. Really? Is that Zapdos? So handsome, Serena exclaimed, immediately drawing the attention of Xiaoxu and Air. The 3 little heads huddled together once again. Where is it? Let me see, it really is Zapdos. Exactly like the description in the Pokemon Encyclopedia. Right, that's how it should be. You know, I was so moved to see Zapdos back then, and I even won the Best Photographer award for that photo of Zapdos. Amen crossed his arms, nodding his head with a smug look as he listened to the girl's voice, which was a bit raspy with excitement. But with a fleeting glance, his once smug face suddenly stretched. Hey, you, aren't you surprised? Don't you want to see what Zapdos looks like? You know, I went through a lot of trouble to get this photo, and it almost cost me my life. Amen was clearly dissatisfied with Yu's nonchalant attitude. At least he had to give some credit to this photo, it was one of his most proud creations. Oh, I just took a quick peek, it's really quite impressive. Oh, and that's it? Amen was speechless. This was too perfunctory. What do you mean by really quite impressive? This was clearly impressive, wasn't it? Ordinary people couldn't even see the shadow of a legendary Pokemon. Why do you seem so unsurprised from the beginning to the end? You know, this is a legendary Pokemon. Even rarer than a quasi-god Pokemon? Amen couldn't stand Yu's indifferent expression anymore, and he stood up in excitement. His violent movements, his angry expression, made him look as if he was ready to fight. This startled the 3 women who were concentrating on the photos, and Serena almost lost her grip, nearly throwing the album out. The Pokemon around him, who had been doing their own things, also cast their gazes, though the meaning behind each one was different. Feeling the gazes from all directions, Amen's previously heated mind finally calmed down. A cold sweat dripped down his back, and he felt a deep sense of uncertainty. But when he met Yu's slightly puzzled gaze once again, his mind was completely blown. A legendary beast. This was a legendary beast, not just some common cabbage. Even more powerful than those quasi-legendary Pokemon. Had these legendary beasts lost their lore? Or had I been stuck in the city for too long, completely oblivious to the power of other places? Oh, it's just a legendary Zapdos? Is there any need to be so surprised? Yu was truly baffled. It was just a legendary beast, but why was there such a fuss, as if he had never seen anything like it before? Considering the past, even before his travels, he had grown up surrounded by Pokemon, many of them legendary. Chapter 642 Exposed. Having practically grown up playing with legendary beasts, it was practically impossible for Yu to express a serious expression upon seeing one. Only a being of the caliber of Ho-Oh, Lugia, or Arceus could truly elicit such expression. Besides, this Zapdos wasn't a real thing, it was just a photograph. And since it was a photograph, finding a photo of a Pokemon in this day and age wasn't easy. Besides the Pokemon Pokédex that trainers received before their journeys, newspapers, and children's playing cards, there were plenty of ways to see any Pokemon you wanted to see. Of course, this also included photos taken by photographers. While, as mentioned before, photographing a legendary beast was incredibly difficult, some photographers did manage to get lucky. But for Yu, these were all just illusions. Rather than watching these unrealistic beings, it was better to take action and capture one himself. Or if taming a legendary beast seemed too difficult, then there was always the chance to take a step back. Capturing a Ditto would mean possessing a wide variety of Pokemon. Of course, some more humane Pokemon trainers wouldn't do this. Most Pokémon, after capturing them, are trained to preserve their natural qualities. But then again, are those legendary beasts really that hard to come by? Serena, still a bit confused at this point and unaware of the difficulty of encountering legendary beasts, suddenly chimed in with this thought, completely oblivious to the situation. They're hard to come by, of course. Some unlucky souls, those with bad luck, may never even see a legendary beast in their entire lives. As if his tail had been stepped on, immense fury exploded, and he roared involuntarily, almost recklessly. But Serena isn't the only one who feels that way. I feel the same way too. Aren't they just legendary beasts? We've seen them several times during our travels. Yeah, let me think. The legendary beasts we saw are Suicune, Darkrai, Groudon, Kyogre, Rayquaza, Xiaoxu. Beside her, began to count them diligently on her fingers. Serena and Air would occasionally remind Xiaoxu, as if she'd missed any. Little did she know that Amen was completely stunned. Had he heard correctly? Was he deaf? What was he hearing? Suicune, Darkrai, Groudon, Kyogre, Rayquaza. If Amen could accept the names of the first two Pokémon, then the rest were completely unacceptable. After all, no matter how rare those first two Pokémon were, they were nothing compared to the ones that came after. After all, they weren't even on the same level. And while the first two were considered mythical beasts, they'd been spotted several times before. Their habitats were too closely intertwined with the human world. One helped purify sewage, the other caused nightmares. But the last few, Amen truly couldn't imagine. Are you sure you're not kidding? As if finally recovering from the shock, Amen stammered after a long pause. Indeed, I'm not kidding. These mythical beasts are all ones we encountered during our travels. Let's not even talk about the distant ones. Let's take Yu for example. He has a Suicune. Serena, as if trying to show off, unhesitatingly revealed Yu's possession of a mythical beast. By the time she realized what she was doing, it was too late to defend herself. She could only cover her mouth, like someone trying to cover their ears and steal a bell. Her beautiful eyes darted nervously around. Although Yu had long been prepared for the events that would unfold should Suicune be exposed to the public, perhaps simply out of habit, he still let Suicune out whenever he went camping. However, he also reminded Suicune to avoid public exposure. And when strangers joined them, Yu wouldn't put Suicune back into the Pokeball. Instead, he let it hide on its own, as long as it remained undetected. This gave Suicune some freedom to move about. After all, if confined to the tiny confines of a Pokeball, even a human would likely go mad. Yu had previously reminded Serena and the other two of this, but Serena had unexpectedly brought it up. This left Yu speechless. What? Is he telling the truth? You actually possess a legendary beast. Holy shit, is this real? Amen was a little incredulous, but mostly excited. Ho, big news, this is big news. He'd actually found a trainer with a legendary beast. If he could just snap a few pictures of it, and then add a few intimate photos of him and Suicune, wouldn't that be so awesome? Think about it, although he had been able to take photos of other things before, it had almost always involved risking his life, sometimes even resulting in a near-certain death. And yet, even then, he'd only managed to capture a photo of his Aptus. The main reason he'd come to this volcano this time was because he'd heard rumors of Moltres within. He was just trying his luck, but he'd made all the necessary preparations before coming here. All he had to do was wait for Moltres' presence, and his plan would be ready. But despite all the preparations, how could anything compare to meeting a trainer with a legendary beast? One must admit, Amen felt immensely jealous and envious when he heard Yu actually possessed a legendary beast, Suicune. But this couldn't stop Amen from building a good relationship with Yu. Wouldn't his life be much better when that happened? And most importantly, he had the self-awareness to know what he was doing. Chapter 643, The Divine Beast. While constantly taking pictures of a single legendary beast can be a bit monotonous and boring, putting yourself in their shoes is crucial. Having one is better than having none. Hey, Yu, you have a legendary beast, Suicune. Can you let me take a look? Ever since I was little, I've always wanted to take pictures of every legendary beast in the world. Amen rubbed his hands together shyly, looking at Yu with a somewhat sheepish look. His face blushed almost as much as a monkey Pokemon's butt, a bit embarrassed. No wonder Yu had been so indifferent and uninterested in the Zapdos Pokemon he'd photographed from the start. He was a trainer who owned a legendary beast, Suicune at that. If that's the case in real life, let alone the unrealistic, imaginary ones. Who would be so foolish as to constantly fantasize about owning something they already possess? What Amen didn't know was that Yu didn't think other legendary beasts were anything special just because he owned Suicune. Having grown up playing with the three sacred beasts, Entei, Rikao, and Suicune, over time, it finally became a thing of the past. Looking at the other mythical beasts, they all had a nose, 2 eyes, and a mouth. Of course, there might be some differences, but the most common difference was whether they walked on 2 legs or 4, or whether they could fly or not. Well, since you've said that, I can't refuse you. Suicune, please come out. Words spoken, spilled, can never be taken back. Although Yu felt reluctant to admit it, he didn't want to embarrass Serena. Sui, as Yu finished speaking, a figure suddenly emerged from the dark brush. The swiftness of the figure brought a refreshing north wind that drew people in. Wow, that really is Suicune, Amen exclaimed, a little incredulous, reaching out to touch Suicune. After all, at that moment, anyone would be surprised to see a mythical beast so close to them, and then be able to pet it at will. They'd all be overcome with excitement. But while Suicune had been tamed by Yu, a legendary Pokémon was still a legendary beast, far more powerful than any ordinary Pokémon could possibly be. Facing the stranger's evil claws about to reach out, a subtle aura emanated from Suicune. While this aura seemed chilling to Serena and the other two, Amen didn't see it that way. Under the influence of this aura, Amen felt a chill run down his spine as he gazed into Suicune's clear, spring-like eyes. A chill shot straight through his neck. If he hadn't traveled for years and seen a bit of the world, Amen would probably be paralyzed with fear, or even more mortified. How could this be? Did I make a mistake? Yu frowned at Amen's reaction, a little unsure of his own judgment. In fact, from the very beginning, Yu had approached Amen with the intention of extracting some information from him. He had already made a series of plans. That's why, when Amen was about to touch Suicune, Yu, knowing Suicune's personality, chose not to warn him. He simply wanted to see how Amen would react under the pressure of Suicune, a quasi-king level divine beast. However, the result was obviously disappointing to Yu. He didn't get anything out of Suicune. However, due to his years of honed intuition and vigilance, Yu only relaxed and revealed his true nature in front of acquaintances and friends. At such times, his vigilance was always at its highest. Therefore, he always trusted his own judgment. However, now that his probing had failed, he could only inquire about the other party's purpose. Suicune, please stop scaring him. He's our friend, Yu spoke out of truth, easing Amen's awkward situation. Suicune glanced at his trainer. Seeing Yu give him a barely perceptible nod, Suicune's clear, bright eyes immediately revealed a human expression, and he also nodded slightly in response. Then, Amen felt a might that had once surged towards him like a surging tide now recede, like the tide receding. Huff, 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 Amen gasped, still feeling a bit of fear. I was so scared. It was so terrifying. This Suicune's strength really makes me feel so formidable. After recovering, Amen's eyes still held a hint of fear, but more of it was curiosity. Curiosity about this Suicune, and even more so about how Yu had captured it. That's right. My Suicune has been with me all the way through my travels and challenges. He's defeated countless powerful opponents. Hearing someone praise his Pokémon again, Yu, as its trainer, felt a sense of pride. With Yu's implicit permission, Suicune no longer stopped Amen from making more intimate advances. Stroking Suicune's soft fur, Amen marveled, based on my years of experience as a Pokémon photographer, this Suicune is not only powerful, but also well-trained. This time, it was Xiaoxia who beamed with pride. After all, she served as a nurse and caregiver for the traveling group. Raising Pokémon was her responsibility, something she had taken on since joining the group. Xiaoxia believed that raising Pokémon was crucial to her own Pokémon breeder rank. Right. Amen, you haven't answered my question yet. What exactly are you doing here? Yu, seeing the time was almost right, probed Amen once again, hoping to extract some useful information. But whether it was because he was too excited to see the legendary Suicune, or perhaps he was completely enjoying himself with Suicune, Amen didn't even think twice and immediately forgot the purpose of his visit. After all, isn't there a saying that goes, petting a cat is fun, petting a cat all the time is fun. Especially since he was petting the legendary Suicune. Chapter 644 Persuasion. What else could I do? I'm a Pokemon photographer. My reason for coming here, of course, is to photograph Pokemon. Amon continued his work, rolling his eyes at Yu in annoyance. His mouth twitched unconsciously, and Yu suddenly felt that his question was indeed a bit foolish. Fortunately, no one noticed the awkward expression on Yu's face. He quickly composed himself again, trying to sound calm and composed. Of course I know you're here to photograph Pokemon. But my main question is, what kind of Pokemon are you trying to photograph? This place is pretty much deserted. What's there to photograph? Could there be some rare Pokemon, a quasi-god or legendary Pokemon here? Yu, also looking quite annoyed, jokingly tested Amon. However, after hearing Yu's teasing remark, Amon froze. The hands that were still stroking Suicune subconsciously paused. They looked at Yu in surprise, their voices tinged with doubt. How did you know? You're here because you heard about that creature's habitat, aren't you? That creature, I guess. We're just waiting a little longer. After all, that Pokemon is incredibly rare. Yu, hearing this, calmed down and continued to test the other party. Yet, you have a point. That creature is indeed rare. If we alert them and let it escape, I'll probably cry my heart out. Amon actually thought Yu knew about his trip and his target. He opened up to him without reservation, but the coded language they exchanged left Serena and the others stunned. What the hell were these two talking about? Why couldn't they understand a single word from beginning to end? Was this no longer Earth's language, but the language of another planet? What exactly is this Yu is talking about? He's so mysterious, I don't know, I'm just curious. Didn't we come here because it was too dark and we couldn't continue our journey, so we camped here? How come, now that Yu is talking about it, it seems to have a purpose? What kind of a mystery are they playing? Although and the other two girls were also filled with confusion, out of trust in Yu, they didn't ask their questions right away. Instead, they huddled together again, whispering to each other, discussing quietly. Hey, but by the way, Yu, are you planning to capture Moltres too? Amon asked uncertainly after glancing at Suicune. After all, in his opinion, since Yu already knew Moltres existed in this volcano, any normal person would definitely want to capture this legendary beast for themselves, let alone Yu, who also owns one. Perhaps others may think that legendary beasts are extremely powerful, but that's true. However, according to the information he had learned, the Moltres within the volcano was only marginally powerful. So, while Yu, a water-type legendary Pokemon, might be outmatched by Moltres, a fire-type legendary Pokemon, his stats made up for it. Furthermore, his other Pokemon looked incredibly formidable. Under a swarm attack, not to mention a legendary Pokemon like Moltres, even Lugia would likely be unable to withstand it. Compared to the complex thoughts swirling within Amon, Yu's thoughts were much simpler. He was simply shocked. He had never imagined he'd been right. He hadn't imagined there was a legendary Pokemon here, and most importantly, Amon had come specifically for Moltres. As for the excitement of seeing the legendary Moltres, Yu didn't even feel the slightest bit of it. Even though the legendary Pokemon was restrained, he didn't mind it. However, his original commitment to his responsibility for his Pokemon made him remain indifferent. Gain is a blessing, loss is a fate. His most important goal now was to improve the strength of all the Pokemon he had. Especially Pichu and Suicune, his two biggest trump cards. If they could perform well, then there wouldn't be a single Moltres, let alone a single legendary beast, that he wouldn't be able to conquer. Molten? I remember Molten was one of the 3 legendary birds, right up there with his Zapdos that Amon had photographed earlier. I didn't expect we'd be so lucky to see another legendary Pokemon. That Molten is the most handsome of the 3. The 3 women, who had been secretly listening to the conversation, were completely excited when they heard Molten's name. After all, besides its legendary status, many women considered Molten to be quite handsome. It was practically the most handsome of the 3, 100 times more handsome than the Zapdos in the photo. Capturing Moltres? I'm not sure about that. After all, it's just a rumor, and whether we'll ever see one is still a question. Yu seemed much more relaxed after getting the answer he wanted. He replied with a nonchalant expression, as if he saw everything. After all, don't underestimate me for using a legendary beast like Suicune. These legendary beasts are far more powerful than those of us who keep them at home. That's what you say, but how can you know without trying? You know, Moltres is a legendary beast. How many people want to encounter it, but they can't. And now there's a chance to capture it right in front of you. For some reason, after hearing that you had no interest in Moltres, he became anxious. He even started to persuade you to tame Moltres. You, even if I beg you, you must capture Moltres. Then lend it to me so I can take some cool photos. Then I will be really famous. Not knowing whether what he said was true or not, Amen directly stated his purpose without reservation. Chapter 645, Not Eating. Stop talking. I really am not that interested in legendary beasts. What's so great about legendary beasts? Aren't they just like any other Pokemon, with eyes, a mouth, a nose, and a body? You remained completely unconcerned. He hadn't the slightest idea of making light of the situation. Little did he know that Amen's mind was about to explode at Yu's words. If you hadn't said that, it would have been a good thing. Now that you've said it, we probably wouldn't even be friends anymore. It's called a legendary beast. It's nothing special at all. You know, this is a legendary beast, not just some run-of-the-mill Pokemon. Besides being rarer than those rare Pokemon, it's even more powerful than a quasi-god Pokemon with far superior combat power. However, as if making up his mind, Yu began to change the subject, moving away from the Moltres issue. Throughout the rest of the conversation, Amen would occasionally bring up the topic of catching Moltres, but Yu would always redirect it. But aside from that, the ensuing conversation was quite pleasant. After obtaining both Yu and Suicune's consent, Amen took a series of photos of Suicune as a keepsake. And so, the night passed in silence. The next morning, as the first light of dawn appeared, the tents at the campsite at the foot of a volcano in the Kalos region were opened. Serena yawned and drowsily emerged. She looked somewhat lazy and playful, especially in the long-tailed fiery fox pajama set she was wearing, which only added to her charm. Behind her, a small head slowly emerged from the tent. As if still slumbering, the figure was a bit shaky as it emerged. It was clear that Serena had become accustomed to the fiery fox's company since the beginning of her journey. Even when she slept, she didn't put the fiery fox into her Pokeball, but instead cuddled it to sleep. Hey, isn't that Serena? You're up really early, that's rare. Xiaoxu followed closely behind, her voice filled with surprise. Xiaoxu had already risen, carrying a plate of breakfast, which she placed on the table in front of her. Hey, if I remember correctly, the sun should rise in the west today. Yu's voice, half doubtful and half teasing, chimed in at the perfect time. I don't know if the sun rises in the west, but at least today is a very special day. Clutching a large bag of Pokemon food, looked like she had just finished feeding her Pokemon, and she couldn't help but chuckle. Her long-tailed Firefox was following behind her, also carrying a large bag of Pokemon food, clearly helping its trainer. Hey, what's up with you? I just got up early, why are you teasing me like that? Serena pouted slightly in dissatisfaction, rubbing her still sleepy eyes. She stomped her feet in exasperation and scooped up the Firefox that followed her, her innocent girlish nature on full display. No, it's a bit surprising. After all, you're usually the last one to get up among us. Yu walked to the table, picked up a glass of water, and gulped it down, chuckling softly. What? I'm just excited, okay? The thought of us personally searching for the legendary Moltres today has me so excited I can't even sleep. Look at how dark my eyes are. Serena ducked her head sheepishly at first, poking her index fingers together. But as she spoke, her nerves lit up. They'd agreed to go search for the legendary Moltres today. And with Amen, after all, he was the one who provided the information. With him, perhaps they could find Moltres faster. Look at how excited you are. But let's make a deal. When the time comes, you must stay behind me no matter what. Don't act on your own. I don't know why my eyelids are twitching right now. I have a feeling something bad is about to happen. Yu no longer had the playful expression he had earlier. Instead, he wore a serious look, causing Serena and the other two to nod involuntarily, solemnly assuring him. Don't worry, we'll obey you when the time comes. Serena seemed to realize the seriousness of the situation, and her face, which had been a bit hazy from not waking up, became much more sober. In that case, let's finish breakfast quickly. When Amen comes to find us, we'll be on our way. With that, Yu turned around and took his Pokemon, which had already eaten their Pokemon food, to an open area and began their morning exercises. Yu, aren't you eating breakfast? Xiaoxu couldn't help but ask, her face full of suspicion. You know, outside of Pokemon battles, Yu was the most active eater. Xiaoxu's cooking skills were exceptional, and Yu usually never missed a meal she made. Uncharacteristically, she wasn't the first to rush over after she finished making breakfast today, which made her curious. Could Yu be sick and have no appetite? Or maybe my cooking skills have deteriorated over the past few days? I won't eat. I'll go check on Pikachu and the others first. After all, even though we don't know if Moltres actually exists, it's always better to be prepared. Yu waved his hand, bluntly stating his reason for skipping meals. After all, Yu already had a fellow legendary Pokemon, Suicune. However, because Suicune hadn't been cultivated for very long, it had only reached the level of a quasi-elite. After undergoing a special evolution, it was barely strong enough to compete with elite-level Pokemon. But these strengths were insignificant to the legendary Pokemon, Moltres, whose true abilities were unknown. After all, in Yu's knowledge, no legendary Pokemon was weak. In addition to their own talents and advantages over ordinary Pokemon, the environment in which they grow up has created everything for them. Chapter 646 Breakfast Chat. Now that they had decided to search for Moltres, they definitely needed to make some preparations. Wild Pokemon weren't as docile as domesticated Pokemon that had been reduced to selfish desires. Furthermore, as legendary beasts, they all possessed their own pride. Furthermore, some legendary beasts possessed a strong sense of territory, a fact that held true for both ordinary animals and modern Pokemon. Yu now had to use this limited time to restore his Pokemon to peak condition. After all, before undertaking anything, Yu always considered a possible escape route. Only through such reflection could he ensure safety. Is it really okay for Yu to skip breakfast? Let him. We'll save him some for the journey. Let's hurry up and eat breakfast first, and get ready. Don't let Yu shoulder all the burdens alone. Xiaoxu and the other two quickly devoured their breakfasts in silence. While the three women were enjoying their breakfast, Amen had joined them. Unlike yesterday, he only brought a camera. Amen was already fully decked out in mountaineering gear. Not only that, he also carried an incredibly large backpack. Against his disproportionate frame, it stood out strikingly. Amen, what's that? Wow, that backpack is huge. What's in it? Serena asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Oh, you mean this backpack? It's filled with all my secret weapons. From the very beginning of my travels and photoshoots to now, I've been safe and sound thanks to what's inside. Amen smiled and patted the backpack on his back. As for what's inside, that's a secret. You might find out when you see Moltres. Is it that secret? If you don't tell us, we'll be even more curious, Air said with a chuckle. While curiosity lingered in her eyes, everyone had their secrets, so she didn't intend to delve into it. Instead, she invited Amen to join them for breakfast. By the way, have you had breakfast yet? Do you want to join us? Let me tell you, the food Xiaoxu makes is superb. Oh, really? Then I must try the food made by Chef Xiaoxu. It's true, Amen could already smell the aroma of food coming from far away. But because of face, he didn't dare to go directly to the place without an invitation. But now it's different. Since the other party has already extended an invitation, he doesn't need to be polite. After all, his stomach has been rumbling with hunger. If he finds Moltres and his plan is affected by hunger, it would be a waste of time. Afterwards, Amen started chatting with his son and three daughters while eating. By the way, why haven't I seen Yu? And all his Pokemon have been taken, too. Most importantly, I haven't even spotted Suicune. Could Yu be so impatient he's already gone ahead to scout the way for us, searching for Moltres? Amen, despite his lighthearted and playful tone, was actually deeply concerned. After all, in his mind, his plans couldn't be thwarted, no matter what. Even if these people were far more powerful than him, it didn't change his original intention. Oh. Yu. He's gone somewhere for special training, which is his daily routine. Xiaoxu and the other two girls didn't hold back, directly revealing Yu's whereabouts. Is that so? That's good, Amen whispered to himself, sighing in relief. What did you say? Because Amen's voice was so small, none of the three girls present could hear clearly. It's nothing. Let's eat quickly. After we finish, clean up and get ready to continue our journey. We're only at the foot of the volcano right now. Legend has it that the volcanoes of my kind live in the volcano's cave. And considering the height of the volcano, it probably won't be long before we reach the summit. Amen smiled slightly and forced the subject away. He didn't want to escalate the situation any further. Before he even started, the other party had figured something out and was holding him back. So hi, Greek letter Omega? Upon hearing that they were still some distance from the volcano, Serena instantly wilted. Ha ha ha. Isn't that good, Serena? Just think of it as a post-meal exercise. Besides, think about it, you're not really at the height of the volcano, but the distance from Moltres. Doesn't that make you feel better? Air and Xiaoxu both began to comfort Serena. After all, the three girls were close sisters. That does make sense. Serena seemed persuaded, her fighting spirit instantly rekindled. In that case, Foxy, let's work together. Foxy Serena and Foxy shared a tacit smile. Click naturally, this scene was captured by Amen, the Pokemon photographer, who took out his camera and silently recorded it. However, the sound of the camera interrupted the otherwise harmonious and natural scene. Wow. Amen, are you already filming? You're truly a professional Pokemon photographer, but then again, it seems like we haven't seen your Pokemon since yesterday. Amen. Yeah, now that you mention it, I'm kind of curious to see yours, too. I've heard that every Pokemon photographer's Pokemon is a great helper. Hurry up and show it to us. What kind of Pokemon will it be? I'm really excited. Amen, who had been enjoying his meal, froze at the women's question, and his frantic eating paused. He was clearly still a little confused. How did this suddenly bring up his own Pokemon? Had he figured it out? He actually wanted to see my Pokemon. No, these Pokemon were my life-saving trump cards. They couldn't be discovered. Chapter 647, Snatching Food. Amen, what's wrong with you? Did you choke from eating too fast? Yeah, why aren't you talking? Serena and Xiaoxu looked at Amen in surprise, waiting for him to send out his Pokemon. After being called a few more times, Amen finally seemed to react. His words seemed a little slurred. Then, what? Pokemon? I don't have any Pokemon? Amen faltered, a hint of sadness and forlornness on his face. How could that be? Why don't I have any Pokemon? These days, doesn't everyone have a Pokemon? Yeah, even people from less well-off families have a close relationship with their Pokemon, right? Unless someone has a special experience, like someone who can't interact with Pokemon, they wouldn't keep a Pokemon. But as a Pokemon photographer, you interact with Pokemon every day. You don't seem like someone with that kind of special condition, do you? The three daughters frowned upon seeing this. Xiaoxu even elaborated on her knowledge of the reasons why Pokemon couldn't be possessed. And, Amen, since you're a Pokemon photographer, how do you manage to find rare Pokemon all day long to photograph, without any Pokemon around to protect you? Serena's question finally hit the nail on the head. That's a secret. It's one of my specialties. If you actually find Moltres, you'll probably see it later. For now, I'll keep it a secret. Time flew by amidst the lively conversation. Breakfast was quickly concluded in a cheerful atmosphere for Serena, the other two, and Amen. Meanwhile, Yiyu, who had been out training with his Pokemon to adjust their condition, returned with Pikachu and the others. After a thorough cleanup, Yiyu and the others finally packed up their camping gear. The Pokemon were all returned to their Pokeballs. It seemed this was to make the search for Moltres less tedious. With the exception of Yiyu, who had left Pikachu outside, Serena and the other two girls also released their own starter Pokemon. It must be said that this volcano looked enormous. It was actually quite large when walking on it. To prevent Amen from noticing anything, Yiyu acted very aloof throughout the entire journey, following Pikachu behind. Amen led the entire search for Moltres. Fortunately, Serena and the other two girls would occasionally chat with him along the way, which kept him from appearing awkward. Walking along the rocky path, Yiyu felt completely at ease, completely unfazed. His gaze remained fixed on Serena and the other two girls. After all, the volcano was quite steep, and if one wasn't careful, one could easily slip and fall over a small rock. Therefore, Yiyu kept his full attention on the three girls, fearing they might accidentally step on a rock and fall. But it's true that for Xiaoxu, the less athletic of the three women, this was a bit of a challenge. Even though Xiaoxu had been traveling with Yiyu and the others for a long time and had visited countless places, some things ultimately depended on talent. And then, Xiaoxu suddenly slipped, stumbling and falling to the side. The Vulpix she was holding was nearly flung away. "Be careful." Yu was quick-tracked and rushed forward to support her. "Thank you, Yu." Xiaoxu blushed slightly. After all, her earlier embarrassment was truly embarrassing. "You're welcome, just be careful." "Got it." Xiaoxu playfully stuck out her tongue at Yu. "By the way, to repay you for saving my life, I have something for you," as if suddenly remembering something. Xiaoxu patted her head gently, set Vulpix on the ground, and let it walk on its own. Then, after rummaging through her backpack, she pulled out the breakfast she'd left for Yu that morning. "Hey, I bet you're hungry. This is yours." "He don't look at me with such a touched face, I'll be shy." After handing Yu the breakfast, Xiaoxu quickly picked up Vulpix from the ground and ran forward, winking playfully over her shoulder. "Wow. You actually left me breakfast, that's pretty good." Yu glanced at the breakfast in his hands and couldn't help but chuckle, a warm feeling coursing through his heart. "How about it, Pikachu? Are you hungry now? Do you want to share some?" He handed the Pokémon to Pikachu, who was perched on his shoulder, and shook it to indicate whether it wanted to eat. Pikachu, perhaps it was because of the intense training that morning, or the incredibly high temperature radiating from the volcano, Pikachu looked a little listless, its head drooping weakly. At the sight of food, and especially at the aroma emanating from it, Pikachu's head, which had been drooping slightly, suddenly lifted, its small eyes gleaming with an unprecedented light. Before Yu could react, he snatched the breakfast from his hands. Hey, don't go too far, kid. This is my breakfast, and I'm already very kind to share some with you, and you're actually trying to snatch it." Yu looked at him with a mixture of anger and amusement. He reached out and snatched the food away. Once Pikachu held it in his arms, he transformed into a hungry little squirrel, constantly being robbed of it. Pikachu, still munching furiously, suddenly felt a coolness on his hands, and the once fragrant food was no longer so. The little creature was immediately displeased and wanted to make a noise, but due to the limited space on Yu's shoulders, he could only bark a few times in protest. Okay, it's not like I won't give you food. Really, you're making this training room feel like I'm torturing you. If those people in the league see this, they'll definitely arrest me." Yu felt the helplessness of a poop scooper at this time. After breaking the breakfast into 2 portions, he directly gave it the end that Pikachu had bitten before. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 648 Shame. Pikachu, seeing the delicious food once again return to his hands, Pikachu immediately stopped fussing and happily began to eat again. His previous languid look was gone, he was now full of life and energy. "Boy, are you really hungry? I'm telling you, even though the food is delicious, don't eat too much. Otherwise, if something unexpected happens during the battle, I'll hang you up and beat you up." Yu's weak threats were filled with helplessness. This Pikachu was really becoming more and more like him. He didn't know what was wrong with this Pokemon. He didn't inherit all the good qualities of his master, but instead inherited his bad ones. As if thinking of something frustrating, Yu suddenly felt that the food he was chewing didn't taste as good. He even chewed it fiercely, as if to vent his anger. However, small emotions come and go quickly. You can let go of anything, but not food. With this in mind, Yu once again carefully savored the delicious food and began to observe the surrounding terrain while watching the 4 people walking ahead, still chatting and laughing. But this volcano is really hot. Yeah, we've encountered volcanoes like this before during our travels, but never one this hot. I feel like I'm sweating all over now. It's so uncomfortable. It's really disgusting. At first, there was no feeling, but later, as they climbed higher and higher, the hot wind began to blow continuously. Serena had already taken out a towel to wipe her sweat for the umpteenth time, and Air even took out a small fan to blow it. Really? These past few days have been so hard to describe. We just recently experienced the cold of the snowy mountains. Now we're experiencing the heat of the volcano. Oh. You've been to the snowy mountains before? Looks like your trip was quite eventful, too. Yeah, it was eventful. It really was, and it was incredibly exciting. Xiaoxu still felt a lingering fear as she recalled the events of the exchange meeting in the snowy mountains. Perhaps the volcano was incredibly hot, or perhaps all the chatting had made her thirsty. Amen casually grabbed his water bottle and gulped down a drink without even glancing at it. Everyone, bear with it a little longer. After all, there's molters in this volcano. How can a legendary beast's place be special? Compared to the trainer's constant complaints and listless demeanor, the Pokémon seemed much more relaxed and cheerful. Not to mention Pikachu, who was happily munching on a delicious meal. Even the three Pokémon the three women had left outside to keep them company seemed genuinely happy and enjoying themselves. This might seem a bit unreasonable for other Pokémon, but for these three, it seemed perfectly normal. If they hadn't displayed this behavior, Yu, who was quietly observing everything from behind, would have suspected the Pokémon were ill. After all, the three Pokémon of his beloved son and daughter were all fire-type Pokémon. The scorching heat was probably like being in an air-conditioned room. It looks like these three little guys are fine. But Moltres is truly a fire-type divine beast. Honestly, even I'm feeling a bit hot. Yu wiped the sweat from his forehead, narrowing his eyes as he surveyed the scorching sun overhead. This was indeed a somewhat unfavorable situation. It seemed that today's terrain was more suited to the strengths of grass and fire-type Pokémon. It was also true that, while this unknown volcano was much hotter than average, it wasn't without Pokémon. For example, the group of Slowpokes that Yu and his group encountered on their journey, or the group of Bulbasaur. There are even rumors that Pokémon live deep within the lava of volcanoes. Let's not talk about distant places, let's just talk about nearby ones. Don't assume that the name of the Moltres, the one Yu and his group are looking for, and just because it has wings and the word bird in its name, means it lives in the air. But it's actually quite possible. Numerous research reports have shown that fire-attributed mythical beasts like Moltres mostly reside beneath volcanic lava. And the legendary ancient Groudon is said to currently live somewhere beneath the lava. However, compared to the vast, unfathomable depths of the ocean, the magma is far too hot. Not only ordinary humans, but even some Pokémon cannot possibly survive there. And that leaves no room for exploration. And most importantly, Yu's knowledge of the magma so far is limited to the existence of fire-attributed mythical beasts. Only Pokémon like Charmeleon and Pyrrha can survive in lava. Everyone, hold on a little longer. We'll soon reach the summit. We can already clearly smell the choking smoke and the scorching heat. Amen, sensing their impatience or subtle desire to leave, quickly spoke up. We're really almost there. The higher you go, the fewer Pokémon there are, isn't that normal? Legendary Pokémon are unlike ordinary Pokémon. They each have their own unique personality, and they possess the majesty of a legendary Pokémon, Amen explained carefully, but at this moment, his eyes were already fixed on the approaching summit. Sigh, it feels a bit deserted without the Pokémon. Especially as we go up, the road feels like it's getting narrower and narrower. Aren't you talking nonsense? Most volcanoes look like cones from a distance. Hey, Pikachu, have you finished eating? It's been so long. If you really like it, I'll ask Xiaoxa to make another portion for you later. Your main task now is to quickly adjust your condition. A fierce battle could happen at any time. Perhaps Yu had been so focused on the surroundings that he hadn't noticed what was happening over his shoulder. Turning back, he was immediately ashamed. Chapter 649 Arriving at the crater. At this moment, the Pikachu on Yu's shoulder was still struggling with the food he had acquired from the very beginning. Yu was devastated. How could his fame have resulted in such a foodie Pokémon? It was fine to eat, but shouldn't it be more considerate and less selfless? It was as if it had suddenly realized its master was watching it and understood its thoughts. Pikachu, previously relaxed and enjoying its meal, suddenly became aggressive, shoveling the remaining food into its mouth in a few gulps. Its puffy mouth was adorable, especially with its innocent eyes blinking. The words Yu was about to say suddenly got stuck in his throat, unable to come out. That's enough, you little brat. You're done now. Get your act together. Yu rubbed Pikachu's head, feeling both amused and embarrassed. But now I'm also looking forward to meeting Moltres. The thought of having a real fight with a legendary beast really makes my blood boil. Although Yu said he was not happy before, in fact, his heart and body were very honest. From the way he stroked the Pokeball hanging on his waist from time to time, it can be seen that he was slightly excited at the moment. In addition, his eyes that were mixed with a little anticipation from time to time when he looked around at that time, this further expressed Yu's mood. Once again, Yu stroked the Pokeball containing Suicune imperceptibly, as if this was the only way to confirm the current status of his Pokemon again and again. Hey, We can see the crater now, but the temperature's getting higher and higher. I feel like I'm about to be melted by the volcano. I'm kind of envious of the fire foxes now. Look at their excitement. It seemed the temperature was rising with the altitude, or perhaps it was because they had been climbing since breakfast at Serena and the other two were tired. They had long lost their initial excitement and fighting spirit. If it weren't for their utter belief that was sustaining them, they would probably collapse to the ground by now. However, seeing their current weakness, Yu was really afraid that they would suddenly give way and fall backwards. That would be disastrous. Therefore, Yu didn't dare to look at his surroundings anymore, his attention completely focused on the three women. Everyone, hold on a little longer. We're almost at the crater. It said Moltres is dormant in the lava. Once we reach the edge, we should be able to see what's inside, and Moltres should appear then. Seeing the atmosphere becoming somewhat unsettled, Amen, though somewhat reluctant, offered encouragement. And I heard the view from the crater is truly breathtaking. Firefox Longtail 66 at this moment, the three fire-type Pokemon, who had been happily running forward, finally noticed their master's aversion. They all ran back to their masters, calling out softly, their concern and encouragement proving the power of Pokemon to be truly limitless. It seemed their encouragement was truly working. After a few more calls, Serena and the other two were clearly much more energetic. Though they lacked their initial fighting spirit, they were still able to charge forward. And so, with a surge of energy, everyone finally reached the crater. Because the temperature of the molten lava was so intense, even Yu dared not approach the crater too closely, remaining confined to the edge to observe the situation. Even so, even standing at the edge, Xiaoxia and the others were sweating profusely. The bubbling magma swelled with steam, like boiling water, bubbles swirling constantly within. Occasionally, a wisp of smoke could be seen wafting out, bringing with it a scorching heat. Yu, after merely glancing downward, was terrified. He had just seen the long-tailed firefox accidentally kick a rock into the crater. Without a sound, it was swallowed by the magma. Yu didn't want to be wiped out by a single misstep before even battling Moltres. By then, not only would his body be gone, but even his ashes would be gone. Hey, Amen, we've already reached the crater, why hasn't Moltres appeared yet? Serena asked in a sweet voice, looking around curiously. This question was also on the minds of everyone present, except Amen. Well, don't worry. I think Moltres has fallen into deep sleep. We need to make some noise to wake it up. That way, we can get a glimpse of its true form. Amen seemed very calm, not at all disappointed by not seeing Moltres. I see. Then I suppose you have a plan by now? Tell me, how do you plan to awaken Moltres, the legendary beast, from its slumber within the magma? Yu asked directly without beating around the bush, his expression full of control. Wow, Yu, worthy of being the one who tamed the legendary Suicune. You truly understand legendary beasts. Amen had no doubts, but instead praised Yu. This is simple, and there's no need for any complicated tricks. We just need to make some noise to wake up Moltres from his slumber. As he spoke, Amen began to look around, as if searching for something. Standing atop the volcano, the breeze no longer brought a cool feeling, but instead, nothing but scorching heat. Of course, there were also the bare rocks and small, broken stones scattered around. There were hardly any Pokemon to be seen on the volcano summit. Not even my type, which prefers the heat but isn't afraid of it, was there. Chapter 650 Awakening the Flamebird. But then again, this place is really strange. Amen, are you sure Moltres really exists here? Why do you say that? Amen pinched the corner of his mouth and looked at Air with some confusion, truly confused as to why he suddenly raised such a question when everything was fine before. Well, at the beginning, I could see a few Pokemon. But now at the top, I haven't seen a single fire-type Pokemon. It's really hard to imagine a place this deserted, this desolate, this lifeless place. The legendary Moltres could actually live here. Air directly expressed his doubts. And with his reminder, Serena and the others realized what was happening. Yet, why is there so little life where Moltres is? You know, Moltres is the most auspicious of the three legendary birds, but why is it so? The place where it's at really feels completely lifeless. It's deserted, and it feels desolate, right? After you reminded me, Air, I'm now realizing that besides the dwindling number of Pokemon, there aren't even any flying-type Pokemon to be seen. Perhaps those Pokemon, due to their attributes or their own conditions, can't survive in a barren place like a volcano. But flying-type Pokémon are different. They possess the ability to fly and can fly over this volcano at any time. And yet, right now, right overhead, not to mention a flying-type Pokémon flying over, not even a single cry or single feather has been heard. Xiaoxu clearly had more questions. After all, Xiaoxu's knowledge of Pokémon was far more extensive than Serena and Ayers. How should I know? It's not up to me to decide where Moltres is. I only know he's sleeping here because I've been asking around. And remember, Moltres is a legendary beast. While it might bring some good luck to humans, Pokémon don't see it that way. After all, he's a legendary fire beast. Even in his slumber, the divine power he exudes is unmatched by ordinary Pokémon. Amen was momentarily stumped by the question, but then he quickly caught on and unloaded everything he knew and speculated. As for why we haven't seen any flying-type Pokémon, I think it's because the volcano's temperature is incredibly high, and the smoke rising from the crater should be affecting flying-type Pokémon. That's why we haven't seen any flying-type Pokémon yet. They might be avoiding him. After saying all this, Amen was thirsty. He quickly took off his water bottle and gulped down a drink, despite the skeptical looks the three women gave him. Is this true? Why does it feel so unreal? But I think what Amen said is correct. I've observed this on the way here. As we climb higher and higher, the number of Pokémon we encounter not only decreases, but their strength also increases. At this point, before Xiaoxu could raise her question again, Yu interrupted. In fact, what Amen had said before was just Yu's speculation. After all, besides the fact that there aren't many Pokémon around here, there's probably more to what you said before about no flying Pokémon passing by. It's the divine aura emanating from Moltres. After all, don't forget that Moltres, besides being a fire-type divine beast, also has flying stats. Woohoo! I'm so touched. Yu is still the one chatting with me. Come on, darling, let's get busy. Go away, stop annoying me. Hurry up, stop stalling, you have work to do. Yu waved his hand in disdain, shoving Amen, who was about to throw himself at him in another show of familiarity. Oh. Yes, we have work to do. Just watch from the side. Amen finally seemed to realize he had work to do and put all his luggage away. Then, with his back to Yu and his group, Amen began to fiddle with it. After fiddling for an unknown amount of time, Amen stood up, holding an unknown object. Without waiting for anyone to ask, he tossed it into the crater. It was obvious that something thrown in wouldn't make a sound. But just as Yu was about to ask a question, a deafening sound, like thunder, suddenly rang out in front of everyone. Oh my god. Doo. What's going on? What exploded? Following the deafening sound, 3 high-pitched screams pierced the sky. Feeling the stinging pain in his eardrums, even a martial arts master like Yu, who possessed the protection of internal energy, instinctively covered his ears to block out the pain. What were you 3 yelling about? Seriously, you gave me a scare. Yu glared angrily at the 3 women who had just pounced on him. Well, that sound was just too terrifying. Okay, Serena was still stuttering, but it was Air who finally articulated what she wanted to say. I say, is it really that serious? You're so scared? I think that sound must have been Amen's doing. Yu rubbed his temples with a headache. Really? Did you really do that? Amen, you're so mean. How could you scare us like that? That's not so bad. It only scared us. If it had scared anyone else, the plants, what would you have done? Amen felt completely wronged. Everything he had done was wrong. Hadn't they told him to figure it out before? Now he had figured it out, and now he was blaming himself for everything. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.